Welcome back to the Unbound podcast. Today's guest is Ryan McMillan. Ryan was a Navy SEAL. He's also the owner of Grayboe Stocks, where they make really nice stock systems for your bolt-action rifles. His last name is probably familiar to some of you who dabble in the firearms industry. His grandfather actually created the McMillan stock that's famously on the M40 used by the military. Also made famous to some of you young people because of Call of Duty and games like that. It's a legendary system. And he's continued on doing his own thing, changing up how manufacturing is done and everything to try and create a great product that's done cheaper and faster, so you're not waiting like a ton of time for custom stocks and everything. So Ryan discusses his military career. We talk about business as a business owner, advice for people there, fatherhood, and again, mindset for those who are warriors downrange. I absolutely love this conversation. It's fantastic getting to sit down with Ryan, and I want to thank my friend Tyler for hooking me up with Ryan for this episode. So thank you, Tyler, and let's get started. I was listening to your podcast with Black Rifle Coffee, and heard you talk about Grayboe and how you came up with the name.
Yeah.
You want to start and just share that?
Sure, yeah. So Grayboe is my two sons' names. And long before I started the company, there was a time when, people were kind of gobbling up .com websites. And so I just was thinking about names. And back then I was like, I had this, vision of starting all these different companies. And back then you could get 6-7 letter .coms, and they weren't like ridiculously, they were just normal price. Nowadays, if you try to, even if it's available, you can't get a 6 or 7 letter .com. It's thousands of dollars. So anyway, this is probably back in like 2011, and so I saw it. Like my boys' names, Gray and Bo, and it's 7 letters, but my son Bo, his name's spelled a little bit differently. It's BOE. And so that allowed me to grab that because BOW, BO, all the normals, it's all taken, yeah. So I was able to grab that. And then I was working at McMillan at the time. I owned that company, a partial owner of that company. And then when we sold that, I kind of ended up, there's a long story to it, but ended up doing Grayboe, or had this idea for rifle stocks. And I named it Grayboe. It just seemed like a good name and had the .com. And
that's cool.
So yeah, my boys' names. Grayson is his name, but we call him Gray and then Bo.
Yeah. There is, I don't even know if this is true. I should look it up. But I remember being in a music store back in the day, and you have Zildjian cymbals, right? Mm-hmm. And you said you're a drummer.
Yeah.
And then Sabian, which I believe there's a split off, a division at Zildjian family deal where they went and took it a different route. I want to say maybe father passed his 2 sons, something like that. Mm-hmm. But Sabian, the name, was named after his 3 kids, first 2 letters of each name, Sally, Benny, and Annie.
That's cool.
And so, like, when I heard you talk about that on Black Rifle, I was like, oh, that's crazy, because similar to how Sabian did theirs.
I feel like Adidas was the same way.
Really?
So it's actually pronounced Adidas. I think it's German or something like that. And Adi and then Das, I guess, were maybe the 2 kids' names. I can't remember, but something like that.
Yeah.
I learned that, some random fact a long time ago.
That's fun. That's something no one really wants to talk about, is all the German companies that were supporting, Nazi war efforts that everyone just, we're cool with them now.
Yeah, what was the car company that was a big one back in the day? Was it Volvo or... one of the car companies was...
Ford was building motors there and had a factory that they were putting the motors in, I believe, tanks. And we ended up bombing the Ford plant where that was being done in Germany. And then Ford was suing the U.S. government for bombing their plant. Like, there's a bunch of weird stuff. And, of course, BMW, their insignia is like propellers from doing engines and everything. Mercedes as well. I don't know. There's all kinds of companies, though. And it's just weird every now and then when you hear about them. It's like, that's kind of awkward.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, let's talk about you and things from your childhood that shaped who you are today.
Sure. Well, I grew up. I was when I was little. I was chubby, big boned, husky, whatever you want to call it, right? Like my mom. And so, I grew up all the way up until about high school, kind of, not cool, not popular, kind of getting, bullied here and there, not major, but enough, because when your kids are going to look for anything to make fun of you, whatever. So
right.
that was a part of my life which sucked, but you start to realize, you look back and you realize that those were good times. You learn to deal with adversity a lot.
It's true.
And I had my own things. I wasn't a perfect kid. There were times where I remember not bullying kids, but I didn't really understand what that was. But you would take advantage of kids on kind of because you're a kid. There's this one kid at my school who he was kind of big and he was slow, and we would play with him, we'd hang out with him. But then we were doing, I remember one time doing chicken fighting or whatever, where you jump on the guy's back and you kind of chicken fight, and we were doing that with him, and he was on the bottom, and at first he was having fun, and then after a while, you could tell he was upset, but he didn't talk much, so he couldn't really express it, and we just kept going and going. And I think at the end he was he ended up crying, and we felt so bad we didn't know, but little things like that. But as I got a little bit older, got into high school, I was always playing sports, even though I was kind of little chubby kid. I always had good hand-eye coordination and played baseball, played soccer, played basketball. And as I got into high school, I kind of grew and thinned out and ended up playing basketball because I was long and lanky and tall, and I had good hand-eye coordination. It just ended up what I was doing. I played a little basketball before that. I wasn't all that good because I wasn't fast. But then as I kind of thinned out, I got a lot better, and I became a pretty good shooter. Never ever became super quick or could jump very high, but I ended up being a pretty decent player. Got some scholarship offers. I ended up not going to play because a few of the schools that I wanted to go to ended up rejecting me, and then some other schools that wanted me I didn't want to go to. It was this mess.
That sucks.
But it was the best thing because I ended up kind of just, I ended up going to the military ultimately, and that was I met my wife, and and had some great experiences there. So ultimately, it was the best thing. But I would say that was one of the highlights of my childhood, is playing basketball. I had a lot of fun, and I think when I look back, I think that particular thing right there, playing basketball, the discipline. When I was a kid, and even now to this day, one of the things that I feel like I do is I typically I feel like I work harder than most people at my craft. And I wasn't the most skilled, I wasn't the most talented, but I did end up working hard. And that's what put me to that next level in basketball.
Yep.
Again, not the greatest athlete, but was
put
able,
the time in and
I put the time
out
in
there.
And I think that carried on through my military career and my business career, and not exceptional, I don't think, at anything, but just willing to do the work and put my head down, and so I think that that's valuable to anybody. But that's really my story.
Did you ever read any of the Dick Marcinko books?
Oh gosh, yes, but it's been so long. Before I even went into the military, I mean, it's been 25 years probably. Yeah. I don't remember anything about him.
Well, there's a cool point in there that I had never thought about this until reading him talking about selection for 6. And he said, you've got your guys who are your absolute rock stars, who are so amazing to where it's not even challenging.
Yeah.
And then you have your guys who just keep giving a little bit more, not quitting, who aren't as good, but they will fight through it and continue to give, and they just don't give up. And they're barely making it through, but they're making it through. And he'd select those guys always over the guys who had it easy, because he also knew when stuff got hard, those guys wouldn't choke. Yeah. Whereas the guys who had it easy, it's like, we don't really know if they're breezing through this, you know, whether they have that in them or not.
Yeah, that's 100% true. 100% true. I mean, you could see certain guys. I mean, I do think, though, everybody has their Achilles heel and buds. There are so many things that suck that one of the things is going to get you. I remember a particular guy in my class. His name was Tico, and he's short, stocky, phenomenal athlete. He could do 100 pull-ups on the bar at once without dropping. He could do any PT was easy for him. but he wasn't a very good swimmer because, typically the shorter you are, your water dynamics aren't as good. So he hated swimming and he hated the cold. Hated the cold. Like everybody hates the cold, but he hated the cold. So for me, the challenging part was always the physical evolutions, the running, the O course. Swimming was easier for me because I'm long and lanky, but any of those physical evolutions was tough for me. So everybody has their thing. There are a few people who are just studs, and they exist, and the cold doesn't bother them. They're good at O course, they're good at running, they're good at swimming, they're good at everything. And there's a few guys like that, but most people have their Achilles heel, and that's what everybody's got to get through.
Yeah.
So, but I think he's right about that. Like there's some people who just every day keep pushing it. Like I sucked. I was the worst runner, maybe in Bud's history. I don't even know how I made. I mean, I do know how I made it, but I was probably one of the worst runners in history of the SEAL teams. Like I just was not a good runner and passed by the skin of my teeth on the runs. And everybody's like, "Oh, running!" Like everybody thinks swimming's hard, right? O course and like hell week, and I'm like, no, I almost failed because of my runs. And that's how the whole thing works. I was in boot camp with a guy. You have to pass a qualification test to actually make it to SEAL training. Okay. He had signed up in boot camp. He was going to SEAL training. We were in the same boot camp. Just him and I were the only ones. And when we did our qualification test, it's a 500-meter swim. You have to do like 12 pull-ups, 50 sit-ups, 50 push-ups, and you have to do then a run, a mile and a half run in like, 10 minutes, something like that. Mm-hmm. He failed the sit-ups. Of all the things that you could fail, you failed the sit-ups.
I struggled with that a lot for quite a period, and I don't know why. But that was one that would just like after high school, my number kept going down so quick on sit-ups, whereas everything else felt pretty breezy.
Yeah, so everybody's got their thing, and like I said, few guys just are good at everything. Everybody's got one thing that they're just not good at, and they have to overcome.
When you were looking at going to the military, what branches were you looking at, and why did you choose Navy, and maybe why you didn't choose other routes?
I wasn't the type of person who always wanted to go into the military. It was kind of a last minute thing, to be honest. I was a couple influences. I had got done with high school, and I thought I wanted to go to just college, and I didn't really know what I wanted to do. And so I went to college. I didn't really like what I was doing. I didn't have a passion for anything that I was doing.
What were you going for at that time?
Just business, because I didn't know. I was just, doing some general study there. But I ended up, after a couple of years, I was watching, you watch shows, you get influenced, and you're like, there's all these cool military shows, and you get influenced, and I just like, maybe I should go into the military. And the first thing I looked at was being a pilot, because I was like, I want to do something cool, and that was cool, and I didn't know any better. I looked into it for a little bit, and I remember we live by a big Air Force base, which is a Luke Air Force Base in Phoenix. And there were some pilots around, so I ended up talking to one of them. And one of the things I didn't like is he's like, it's a minimum 10-year commitment. I'm like, I really didn't know what I wanted to do, but I just wanted something that I can get kind of step my way into other things. And so that was too much for me, too much of a commitment. And I remember, because I grew up around SEAL team guys. My grandfather, building rifles for the SEAL teams when, in the 80s, for the original SEAL Team 6 guys and Marcinko, those guys. So I grew up around them, and I remember thinking to myself initially when I said I wanted to go into the military, I was like, I don't really want to go into the SEAL teams. And then it just kept, it was just in the back of my mind the whole time. And when I kind of eliminated all these other things, I'm like, maybe I do. And something happened to where I just was like, okay, this is what I'm going to do. And I don't remember how quick it happened, but there wasn't a long process. By the time I actually went to MEPS, which is where you sign up, I was in boot camp 3 months later. And it was probably only a couple months that I had started thinking about it before that. And then I just kind of was figuring out what I wanted to do, went to MEPS, and then I was in boot camp. And so that's how quickly that kind of spiraled. And, I think for the SEALs, they were just very well advertised,
at the time.
Different movies, and they had documentaries out, and it was when you're young, you you only know what you see. It's harder for you to think through all the different options. So you know what you see.
Well, I didn't know a lot of that existed until like I was in law enforcement, like groups like Delta and stuff. I've heard of special forces and Rangers and SEALs, but yeah, the whole SEAL thing was definitely everywhere, like throughout the 90s for me growing up. And I really only knew of Special Forces from Lethal Weapon when Mel Gibson, that's a Special Forces tattoo.
Yeah.
And I was like, what is that exactly?
Yeah, you got to watch the right movies, watch the right shows, like, and that kind of angles you towards where you want to go. I mean, the reality for me is I ended up, what I really wanted to do is I really wanted to go be in the CIA. And, but when that was back during the time where websites were just coming online, so you could go on the website. CIA had a website, and I remember reading like qualifications, like you have to be 28 to even apply. I don't remember why, but that was a qualification. So I'm like, well, I got to do something, and that's why I ended up not wanting to do 10 years, because I was like, at 28, I want to be ready to go. So I'm like, I got to do something in the meantime, and so that's what drove me to the SEAL teams. I'm like, I got to do something that gives me some qualification and something on my resume so that I can get in.
Right.
And so that's what, and you know, it was initially a 4-year commitment for the SEALs. It ended up being a 7-year commitment, because by the time you get through all the stuff, you have to re-enlist for at least 4 years once you get to your first team. So it takes a long time to actually get to your first team, because BUD/S is a long process. And
I was going to ask, what is that process? So basic, and you said there's like a pre-selection.
Yeah, well,
like qual?
It changes. It's changed over the years, but when I was in, you go to basic, and then you go to what's called your A school, and your A school is like your rate. So your rate is your job in the Navy, and back then, SEALs didn't have their own rate or their own job description. You were still a Navy job. So, for instance, like you could be an intelligence specialist or an operations specialist or a bosun's mate. And so, yeah, you just go through A school. So you do your A school, whatever you choose. So when you sign up for the Navy, you choose a job. Even though there's a longer story than this, but and we can get to it in a second. But you have to choose your job in the Navy, even if you end up going to be a SEAL. And so you go to boot camp, then you go to your job, what's called an A school, but it's your job. Like I was an operations specialist, the guy who looks at a radar. So I had to go to radar school for 9 weeks, and then I went to SEAL training. And during the process, you have to pass a physical fitness test. Really, it's not like a selection. It's just a physical fitness test in boot camp. And I remember that was a really distinct moment, because you know how boot camps work. There's we call them ships, but there's about 100 people per ship, and there's like 9 or 10 ships going on. So there's about 1,000 people going through at once, going through boot camp, and then there's another 1,000 people behind you. They're just pumping people out. And so, in my section of ships, the 1,000 people, there were 17 people who were trying to go to Naval Special Warfare, and you have to pass the same test. And it's not a hard test. It doesn't sound hard. It's like I said, 500 meters, you have to swim. It's like 15, or it's like 10 minutes and 30, it might be even 12:30. It's like you could dog paddle 500 meters in like 12 minutes and 30 seconds. And then I can't remember, it's 8 or 12 pull-ups, it's 50 push-ups, 50 sit-ups, and then you do a run. I think it's 10 minutes and 30 seconds for the run for 1.5 miles. It's not hard. But it's these back-to-back, and you do them back-to-back. So the first thing you do is the swim, and most people fail. Like half the class is gone after the swim. I'm like, dude. And I grew up swimming, so most people were scared of that part. So I grew up swimming. It was easy. I was a really good swimmer. That was easy for me. I get out. Actually, one of the hardest things for me was the pull-ups. Not great at pull-ups, but I did it, no problem. Because you have to, when you're doing the pull-ups, you have to it's like up, down. And so you don't just get to do them on your own and kipping. You're like doing perfect pull-ups, and they're focusing, their attention on you, and they're making sure you go up and down. Anyway, get to the end. We all get through the run, and of the 17 people that started, 3 finished. Wow. And so you can't go to BUD/S until you pass that, and I think you only get 2 chances, and so maybe a couple more pass later. But there's a selection, even though doesn't sound crazy, there is a selection process that weeds a lot of people out before people even get to buds. So people say, oh yeah, 1 in 4 or 1 in 5 people make it when you start buds to end. But there's a whole selection of weeding people out even before you get there. So
that's crazy. All the stuff around water, like the training and everything with that, is that something? Did you have like a fear of any of that, or is there weird stuff where you're learning like how to hold your breath and everything? Like I really don't know much about that side on the training.
I was always comfortable. I was on swim teams when I was a kid. I was always comfortable around the water, but on top of the water mostly. I was not a good breath holder. I never. So there's an evolution in buds where you have to jump in the water, do a flip, and then do a 100 meter swim. It's 50 meter swim. It's basically a 25 length pull. You go there and back, and that's something you have to pass. Mm-hmm. You can't move on without that. And people freak out. You're cold. You're standing on the pool deck, and you're cold, and they're yelling at you. And when you're trying to hold your breath, you want to be as calm as possible. If your heart rate is going, like you're not going to hold. I don't care how good of a breath holder you are. You're not going to hold your breath for long at all. And not only are you holding your breath, but you're also physically doing physical exertion. Right? Like you're swimming. So you have this combination of I've got to hold my breath and I've got to keep this breath in, but I've also got to swim. And so like if I swim too fast, I'll run out of breath too soon. If I swim too slow, I won't. I've got this combination. I'd never passed. So I did that when I was at home before I went to buds. Like I said, I had 3 months to train before I even went into, and I practiced that over and over, and I never was able to do it. Never. Not only was I never able to do it, I'd never even tried jumping in and doing a flip. I just pushed off one end and I could never do a full 50 meters. So I'm standing there, you're basically lined up, and there's, I don't know, there might be 6-7 lanes. And so, and it's early on, it's before Hell Week. So there's a lot of people, there's still a lot of guys. And so there might be 10 or 15 guys deep. And you're somewhere in the middle, you're waiting, and the guys are going and they're freaking out and people aren't passing. And it's a scary time because that was one of the most scary evolutions I ever did because I knew mentally I'd never pass that. I knew it. And I'm like, and so to this day, I don't know. I got my turn. I got up there, I jumped in, I flipped, I swam, and I remember coming back, and they kind of teach you this, but you get that initial feeling like you need breath, right? Mm-hmm. You have to overcome that.
Right.
Because you'll never make it. So that initial feeling of needing breath, it takes, 15, 20, 30 seconds to overcome that. But the problem is after you overcome that, you don't get any feeling anymore that you need it.
15 to 30 seconds?
Yeah.
That's wild. So that's that point where you feel like, I got to get air or I'm going to die. That lasts for 15 to 30 seconds?
Yeah, it's a gradual thing, but at some point where you're like, shoot, I need air. Like, it's happening and you're feeling it and you've got to just overcome that because like it's hard your brain thinks you're dying. Really that's what's happening. Right. Your brain's like, if I don't get air, I'm going to die. That's the reality.
It's like the cold plunge.
Yeah.
Like mindset reaction.
Right. And then, but once eventually that feeling goes away and your brain doesn't alert you anymore.
Really?
Yeah. And there's another period, I don't know how long it is, it depends on, probably different for everybody. Right. There's another period in which there's kind of like this euphoric period. And so I was about halfway back on the second lap, on the way back, where that kicked in, where like that euphoric. And what happens a lot of times, they tell you this is, and so you kind of back up a second, they train you, so you're in these lines, right? I was telling you about you're in these lines waiting to go. Well, the guy who's in the front of the line now, since the guy ahead of him just went, he's in the water, he's trained when the person in front of him comes back and hits the wall, the instructor's hovering in the water over that person, making sure he doesn't pass out underwater and die. Mm-hmm. So they're there for safety, but as soon as the guy comes and hits the wall, the instructor throws him up on the deck, and the guy who's next in line, his job is to catch his face. Because very few people, and there are some, but very few people who actually finish have any control over their body left.
Wow.
So that's what happens. So that's like the last half of that 50-meter underwater swim, you're like in this euphoric state. And as you start to get close, you start to see little black spots.
Yeah.
And you reach forward and you touch, and the instructor throws you out. And so they call it the funky chicken. So the funky chicken is you're losing control over your hands. So you're trying to. They tell you to stand. Once you get thrown out, sit on your knees and your hands like this.
Yep.
But you don't have any control over your hands and knees. So you're just doing all kinds of stuff, and that's what the guy's job is, to keep your face from hitting the deck.
That's crazy.
So anyway, that was a cool story. I did it on my first try. I saw so many people freak out, and you're sitting there waiting.
Is that?
To
Do
go.
you think it's a lot like that adrenaline thing? Knowing this is it, this is the real test.
It's just you're scared. I mean, gosh, you're 20 years old, some kids younger, and you're about to do this test. Most people are scared to death of the water. And the instructors are yelling at you. It's pre-Hell Week, so the instructors are always yelling at you, but pre-Hell Week's even worse. So you're stressed out, and you're overthinking everything. And for me, I knew I had tried this many times and never passed and never did it on my own with nobody screaming at me,
right?
in warm water, And so anyway, yeah, that was kind of my, I would say, intro to, to the underwater stuff. And I would, just to kind of close that part out, the underwater evolutions, in my opinion, and I think I'm right, and I think a lot of SEALs would agree with me, but the underwater evolutions are what makes SEALs SEALs. There's a lot of stuff we do on land that it's hard. Hell Week's hard. You have to stay awake for 5 days. Like, it's physically hard, but
that's no sleep for 5 days.
Yeah, I mean, depends. Some people get some sleep. Some people don't get any sleep.
Or you can kind of nod off here and there.
If you win, you get some sleep.
Yeah.
I mean, you get no more than maybe 15 or 30 minutes at a time.
Yeah.
But there's these huge long evolutions that, if you're a winner, they always say it pays to be a winner. And in Hell Week, it pays to be a winner because they may give you like 15 minutes to sleep before everybody else gets done. So,
did they ever train you underwater to like black out?
No, like they never like took us there on purpose.
Right.
I don't think they could legally get away with that.
That's something I always wondered if that was a thing where they make you fade out to the point and
Not
then
on
revive
purpose.
you or something.
No.
Okay, so
but it happens. There's so many things that we do that it happens a lot.
Right.
Yeah.
Did you have that happen?
Well, just really the closest was on that 50-meter underwater swim. There's a lot of other things that are actually harder than that, but that one in particular was the closest I came to blacking out.
Were you doing the funky chicken?
Yeah,
when you were
for
brought
sure.
back up?
Yeah, I didn't like black out or anything fully, but I was definitely doing the funky chicken. There were some guys I remember just being like pissed because some guys just came out no problem. Not many, but some. Some just studs. Some people are just studs, man.
Yeah.
And then there is the rest of us who just every evolution was a battle. So.
And when you did buds, is that always just West Coast, or does the East Coast have their own?
No,
buds
everybody goes through the same. You don't get to your. You don't get assigned to your team. You get assigned. You get to choose, or you don't get to choose. You get to suggest what team you want to go to, and it's like at the end of the second phase, and then they tell you what team you're going to, like right before graduation.
Yeah.
And so, but everybody goes to the same SEAL training in Coronado. Everybody, yeah.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Well, what was next? How did I don't know anything on the Navy side of how this stuff works, especially for SEALs. So like I assume you're spending a ton of time training after that, learning different elements of the job. So what was that like? And how long is that process?
Yeah. So once we got out, and I think things have changed again, but when I was once we got out of BUDS, we went to jump school in Fort Benning for 3 weeks. It was awesome and it sucked at the same time. Being there at an Army school, they hated us, we hated them. We thought we were badasses, and we weren't yet. We thought we were because we just got done with BUDS, but we didn't know how not badasses we were yet. And the Army, and so we kind of had this chip on our shoulder, and the Army guys hated us because we had this chip on our shoulder, and we were in our own way, we were badasses. I mean, we were very confident and we were very good at what we did but we weren't warriors yet, I guess I should say. We were very competent and very good at what we did. Like we were we were going through with just regular Army guys, and so there was a big difference in how we operated and how they operated.
That makes sense.
So there was a lot of tension.
Well, and everybody is also the ego is part of the training too, right? Where they're building you up with that, to where you're telling yourself at the end of the day how cool you are.
Yeah, I mean they don't.
You just get there because you're passing and earning the things.
Yeah, it's you're young and you've made through this very difficult training. They're not training you to be ego, have an ego or not have an ego. They're just beating the crap out of you, and how whatever comes out, comes out. And you don't get humbled until you finally get to your team. So you've got this period where you're like, you think you're this badass.
That makes sense.
And this short period, especially when we went to Fort Benning to do jump school, we just thought we were so freaking cool. And these Army guys were like, we just, little did we know we weren't even warriors yet. We just had made it through tough training. Yeah. And so then you get to your team though, and you get humbled really quick, because then all the guys at the team have done what you've done, plus they've been doing warrior shit for years now.
Yeah.
Right. They weren't just like, hey, I passed this training. Right. They were real war. They would, at the time when I was in, 9/11 happened when I was in Buds. So a lot of the guys hadn't been to war, but they had been doing SEAL stuff for years. So like you still were humbled quite a bit.
So you're in Buds with that. Were you allowed to? Did it kind of take things to a pause, like with all that being on the news?
I remember I was at this place called La Posta. It's like in the mountains just east of San Diego, and we do land nav, different types of land nav and different types of operations there. I say operations, it was just part of Buds. It's more land nav, but also kicking our butts. And we were mustering in the morning, and we were about to do, I think we were in the middle of a PT, or just starting a PT session, and we had some instructors come out of their little hooch that they hung out in, and one of the instructors, God, I can't remember who it was. I can see his face. Anyway, he comes out and he's like, "Hey, I think he's just like terrorists hit the World Trade Center." And we're like, "Okay." And I didn't know anything about terrorism. I didn't know anything. I didn't know who Osama bin Laden was. I didn't know who Al Qaeda was. I didn't know anything. I was like, "Well, okay." It didn't really register at all with me. But, those guys had been in this world of fighting bad guys.
Right.
These instructors had at least 2 or 3 deployments. So they'd been in the teams for, probably in the Navy for 10 years by this time at least. So, and he came out again. Second one went down. And that was really all. Like, we didn't really do much. We continued on with the PT.
Yeah.
And we just did our thing. And we came back. I remember, because I think we typically are up there for a week or something. We came back and the whole base was just shut. Like, it was a disaster. To get to Coronado, you have to go over the Coronado Bridge. And then so we, that was like shut down. It was not shut down, but it was just to get onto Coronado, you had to go through these checkpoints. And the checkpoints were so strict that the lines were over the bridge, and it took hours just to get onto the base.
Kind of on a lockdown of sorts.
Yeah. So not even just the base, because there's a lot of bases on Coronado, but Coronado itself is a civilian place. So, but they did have these like checkpoints right as you get into Coronado, and they were like checking everybody. And then the military bases themselves were on high alert. So, when I first got in, they didn't barely even check your ID to come on the base. But then it just became really serious about checking IDs and making sure that you didn't have any weird people with you. So yeah, things changed very drastically after that.
Yeah, we used to just go to the airport and go through security to watch planes land for entertainment, and it's wild how all that was shut down from that. Man, I heard on the radio driving to school. I was a freshman in high school when it happened, and on the radio, they're like, the DJs are kind of like laughing about how some prop plane somehow hit one of the trade towers. Like they thought it was some Cessna or something. Like no understanding of what it was quite yet. And then in class, we ended up turning on the TV. One of the students was ticked because he wanted to see it. Tall guy, he goes over there and turns on the TV, crosses his arms and blocks it so the little old lady teacher couldn't shut it off. And then we see the second plane hit. And then when she saw that, it's like, oh, this is what's going down, you know? And then it was like all day in school, we weren't really doing any assignments, or it's like casual, just basic work, and the TVs were running the whole day. It's crazy. And I remember watching people in Pakistan like celebrating. And that was like the first time. It was like, and we're all like, screw Pakistan. Where's Pakistan? You know, learning about countries that we hadn't really thought or heard of at that time. It's saying the whole Bin Laden name. And it's like, what?
Yeah. Yeah, we didn't, like, I didn't have a TV that worked in my barracks. And so, like, I never watched TV during that time. I had a TV that would play some movies, so I'd play some movies every once in a while, but I didn't have a TV that had any stations or anything. So I don't remember ever watching anything even after that. I just knew that, like, you know, planes hit the Twin Towers, and, you know, it was hard to get on the base, and everybody's talking about where we're going to be going to war.
Right.
So that was what we were talking about.
So do you guys get trained for different regions?
Yeah. So prior to that, actually that event changed the way that the SEAL teams operated. Right. So prior to that, each SEAL team had its area of operation. And so, like, for instance, SEAL Team 2, which was where I was at, since its inception, I assume, I don't know this for sure, but I would imagine since its inception, it was a cold weather team. So it would operate mostly in Northern Europe, and that was where guys would deploy when there wasn't a war. And, you know, I think SEAL Team 3 was South America, SEAL Team 4 was like Southeast Asia, something like that. I can't remember the details, but like I remember those two were jungle teams. And yeah, so, but right when 9/11 happened, I remember being back at Buds, and there's a lot of talk. It took a few weeks, probably maybe a couple months before this actually went into effect, but we went to war in Afghanistan, and what they started doing with the SEAL teams is now it's like, okay, we need every SEAL team ready to go to war. So like SEAL Team 2 is not going to Northern Europe. You know, SEAL Team 3 is not going to South America. So what they ended up doing is they took the East Coast SEAL teams, which are all the even teams, and they basically were like, you're going to be going to Iraq and then back east, right? Like east of the globe. So from the East Coast SEAL, like from the East Coast of the United States to Iraq. And then the West Coast SEAL teams would take Afghanistan and around the other way. Mm-hmm. And so that's really how they split it up. And it was kind of a bummer for me in a way. I mean, it wasn't a bummer. I mean, we were going to war, so that was cool. But I actually, when I was kind of thinking about going to the SEAL teams in the first place, I had watched some documentaries on like cold weather warfare, and I was always really interested in that. I was always kind of interested in that cold weather Russian gulag type. I've always been fascinated by that. And so I got to my team, and I got an opportunity to go to SEAL Team 2. I chose SEAL Team 2 as my first choice. I got it. I'm like, yes, like this is all working out. And then I ended up in the desert.
That's crazy. So you like the cold weather, not the summer? Or is you wanted something different from where you grew up?
I don't know.
I guess, or
it's hard to say. I don't know. I mean, I've always liked the cold weather more than the heat, even though I grew up in Phoenix and it's hot there. There's just something mysterious. I love this kind of mysterious stuff, and I feel like the cold is like adds to that, you know. And so that's just I've always been attracted to that, and so I don't know. I can't tell exactly why. It's just something I've always enjoyed, and I remember watching a program when I was, you know, in high school or something, or maybe just after high school, when I saw this cool warriors sneaking around the mountains in snow, and I was like, man, that looks freaking awesome.
Yeah.
So yeah. Other than that, I mean, you're young and you don't really, you just, I see something cool on TV. That's what I do.
No, that makes sense. I remember the first influential movie or anything I had like that was GoldenEye. And it's, of course, I had the game on Nintendo 64. And I remember being at my dad's house over the weekend, and I'm scrolling the wheels. You remember those old TVs where it only has like 13 channels and you got to like scroll the wheel to look at different channels? I see the train scene, where they're riding on the train that's near the end, and watching that blew my mind. And shortly after that, I bought the movie and watched it, and all the cold weather Russia stuff with the satellites and everything, and not understanding at all what an EMP was when that was set off. And I still didn't figure that out for years. I'm like, how did the planes just stop working? That doesn't make any sense. Then I start learning about all the technology aspects of war. It's wild.
Yeah, I mean, it's so crazy to think back now, because I got into the SEAL teams. I wasn't like, I want to go fight wars. I was like, that looks cool. Buds was something I really wanted to do. I grew up, and my dad and I didn't get along very much, so I felt like I had this chip on my shoulder to try to prove something. And so I wanted to do something challenging, and that was part of the reason why SEALs became an interest to me, because Buds was like the hardest thing you could do. I mean, that was pretty widely known at the time. So like, that's really what kind of drove me. But like, all of a sudden 9/11 happens, and you're like, I'm going to war. Because when I got in, it was peace times, 1999, 2000. I was thinking about these things, and all of a sudden you're going to war.
And you thought you were going to be doing like sneak around stuff.
Yeah, right. Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. Like, I thought you were working in small teams, teams of 2 or 4, and we didn't go anywhere without, like, when I was the ops that I did, we went everywhere with like 32 guys, 32 SEALs plus some support. We were a small group relatively, but still, like, we weren't doing a lot of sneaking around. We ended up doing a lot of, we called direct action missions, but they're basically kind of SWAT team type, going in and getting bad guys out of houses or different structures.
Yeah.
I didn't do a whole lot of sniper stuff, which is always kind of what I was interested in. But my first deployment, when you first get to the SEAL teams, you don't really get to choose what you want to do. They choose for you. And so they put me on what was called an assault team, and that was the guys who get to kick in doors and go get bad guys that way, which was fun. I'm glad that happened that way. My second deployment, I was put more on the sniper team. But unfortunately, as the war went on, the government restricted us a lot more. Like, the first deployment I had, we just did kind of whatever we wanted to, and we had our own intel collection. We created operations based basically on our own intel, and that was like, there was this really small loop of intel operation. And that was, we just operated all the time. And then my second deployment, everything changed. Like, you didn't do that anymore. All the intel came from one central localized source, and it was fed down to these different units, and like, it was slow and clunky, and we just didn't do that many ops in my second deployment. So when I was doing more sniper stuff, which was my second deployment, I don't know, maybe I only did 5 sniper operations, I did some time in, we still had to fill our obligations elsewhere in the world. So I did like 3 months in South America, in Colombia and Paraguay, and then I came back up to Iraq and spent another 3 or 4 months there. But in that time, we didn't do very many ops. It was so restrictive, and it was frustrating, because that's when the war started to change. We had everything under control right off the bat, and then politicians got their hands on it and started restricting what we could do. So
I always feel like there's political elements of that to restrict certain things, to add length to war efforts, so certain pockets can get lined with money to keep the war machine. In your experience, do you feel like that's at play, and that's
100%.
why those decisions were?
100%. Politicians screw everything up. They got more people killed, and they thought they were doing a good thing by forcing, especially like us, like special warfare units, to like wear more body armor and to have fully up armored Humvees. But they don't have any idea. What they're doing is they're responding to the American public, and the American public saying, we don't want our kids dying over there. I get it, totally, right? I got kids. I don't want them. But what you're doing, what your response is actually hurting us. So what they did, one of the things that they did is they made us, in the first deployment, we'd go around, like the Humvees weren't even armored. We had no doors. And so basically you had 9 guns pointing out of every Humvee as you drive around the city. Nobody wanted to screw with you. When you have 4 or 5 Humvees in a row, and each Humvee had 9 guns pointing at everywhere, no one would screw with you. Well, then they thought they got smart. They're like, well, we need to up armor every single Humvee, and all Humvees need doors. And so now we just became sitting ducks. We had 1 gun on the top, was our turret, but 1 gun versus 9, because at that time, in the first deployment, everybody had a gun and everybody was pointing it out. Second deployment,
I had never thought about that and the effectiveness of that.
It's totally ineffective. So, okay, now we had armor, but they would just blow the crap out of us.
Right.
Because they weren't scared. Oh, no one's going to fight back. They don't got any guns to shoot at. Like a couple, but not the volume we had before. And so, that was an example of how politicians were, I guess you could say they were trying to do the right thing. Maybe they were, maybe they weren't, but they made some kind of policy that actually hurt us. Yeah. They put more body armor on the individuals. They thought body armor was a solution for everything. Like, no, like Army guys. So we got lucky. We kind of just said, screw you guys after some point. We're like, I'm not wearing this body. Like, who's going to come out and stop me? So we wanted to wear as little body armor as possible. We all wore a chest rig, but it was small as we could possibly get it. And we'd be out doing ops or whatever, and we had support, Army support. Like, these guys had so much body armor. I don't even know how you move.
Right.
Because we were jumping over walls. Like, we had to be nimble. Like, you can't wear 100 pounds of body armor and jump over walls.
Right.
So it was frustrating, man. We saw a lot of things that happened in the second deployment where politicians made these decisions that really affected us in a negative way. And maybe they had good intentions, but they don't know what they're doing. They don't know what they're talking about. So, that was bad.
When I did the SRT stuff locally, it was interesting seeing the bigger agencies where they come in with all the armor everywhere.
Yeah.
And I always wondered how you could move like that and be effective. Because we'd clear like a standard 3 and 2 in about 18 seconds, moving methodically through as a team. And I remember the first place we ever hit, we ended up having to hit this mobile home outside of it afterwards as we're checking other buildings. And I could barely fit through the doorway because I had the double stacked AR mags on a chest rig and everything. And it made me so big, like I could barely get in this miniature RV doorway.
I can't even put enough emphasis on how important it is to be lean.
Yeah.
And you have to really balance, like, okay, what am I going to wear for protection versus what are my liabilities when I have too much body armor on? I mean, for what we were doing, we were moving on our feet all the time. Sometimes we're moving in vehicles, helicopters, but we moved on our feet a lot. We jumped over fences. We had to be nimble. Like, there were times where we were jumping fences and doing all kinds of stuff that if we had too much body armor, we wouldn't be able to do.
Yeah.
And so I can't put enough emphasis on how important that was. And like I said, we eventually, as they were trying to put more and more body armor on us, we just said no. And they really couldn't do anything about it.
Yeah.
But the Army, big Army, if you're, they did. They had to. They had no choice. So you just see all this body armor, and they had all kinds. I mean,
all the 3A flaps and everything.
All the flaps, the groin flaps, the shoulder flap. You're like, dude. And especially if you were like the turret gunners, when I remember they had their own set of body armor. That might be okay if you're a turret gunner, and
that sounds nice up there.
Maybe. But I mean, if you ever had to get out of that and run, you're screwed.
Right. Yep.
I'd be just ditching that stuff right away. But
I had a buddy, Cody, that did some pirate hunting where they're doing the stuff on the ships and waiting for the pirates to attack. And he said it was always 2 Americans and 2 Sri Lankans. And it's like the Sri Lankans aren't very big people. And he weighed about, I want to say 230, super buff guy, probably about 5'10", 5. He may be 6 foot. I'm not sure on his height. But he ended up cutting a ton of weight, like 40 or 50 pounds, because it's like these guys aren't going to be able to drag me across the deck at all with gear and everything too. And I remember seeing him when he shrunk down, crazy cut. He's one of those beautiful specimens, just looks perfect muscle wise, everything. But he slimmed down. It's like, well, how much less are you lifting now, losing all that muscle? He's like, I'm actually benching more than I ever have. And that was interesting. That's not how I would have thought that would work.
Yeah, I mean, I remember guys who really spent a lot of time in the gym, even on deployments. You know, where we were at, and most of the time we were like near an embassy, and they had decent facilities there. So we had a lot of guys who'd spent a lot of time in the gym, or just big and jacked. A lot of the guys who were doing the kicking the doors in were, they were carrying a lot of gear. They were, they had to kick doors in sometimes. They had to lift stuff. They had, they were the ones who tended to try to be more jacked, and the snipers try to stay lean because you're crawling around and you don't want to be huge. And it's also kind of a personality thing too.
Right.
The guys who want to kick indoors and blow stuff up, they're kind of like that. They've got that personality to want to be jacked,
Right. That makes sense.
It kind of all goes together.
Yeah. So when you guys did you do training for like boarding ships from a small boat and all that stuff? What's that like?
It was cool. I mean, we would practice. It's called VBSS, Vehicle Borne Search and Seizure, if I remember correctly. It's been a long time, but that would be part of our training, our workup training, and we did that a lot. We'd just have these little small boats. I think they were Boston whalers, if I'm not mistaken. We come up in these Boston whalers, and I don't know how many. I can't.
It's like the air.
No, those were Zodiacs. But the Boston whalers were a little bit bigger. They actually had engines. They were rigid. Ribs maybe is also, I'm trying to think. We had ribs and Boston whalers. So anyway, I can't remember anymore exactly the details of all of them, but those are the couple of the boats that we'd have. We'd go up alongside of a ship, and obviously the goal is to be stealthy and sneaky. You'd have this big long ladder, like rope ladder looking thing. And you'd have this hook, and you'd hook it over the side of the boat, then everybody'd climb up, and it was clunky. Some of the things we did, I don't know how anybody ever thought that we would be able to get 32 dudes over on a ship without being seen or whatever. Because, you're clanking up against the side of the boat. You have to bring all your gear on. So, like, let's say you're a breacher and you got a breacher gear. At least one person carries a sledgehammer, another person carries a quickie saw. And, you're clanking up against the side of the ship. Your sledgehammer's clanking up, But anyway, we do it. And yeah, so we did that a lot. I remember there's been a number of times that I've been scared in training. Like, I would say scared is not quite the right word, but it was iffy.
Yeah.
Iffy in training.
That's a good way to put it.
I've probably been there's been more iffy times in training for me than even in combat. But one time we were doing this exercise on a ship. We had just done the VBSS. It was a whole exercise. We did the VBSS, and then we were doing some extraction, practicing some infill extract on helos. And so the ship's moving, and it's, 30 knots, I can't remember. But the ship's moving, and it's a smaller ship, so it's kind of doing this. And then the helicopter is coming in, and it's on night vision, so it's at night. Helicopter's on night vision. And, the ship is small, so it's got very little room. And it's below, like, what do they call that? What's the captain's...
The bridge?
The bridge, yes. It was below, so the rotors are below the bridge. And it's moving, and the helicopter's moving, and it's basically fast roping guys and then lifting them back up. And so I can't remember the name of it, but they would, one of the things that we did was they would drop a rope, and then, like, I would clip it to my belt or whatever, and they pulled me up. And so I did that once. Everybody did, but I did that. And I just remember being in the helo, and the pilot, he's on night vision, and he's what I think they call it sidestepping. But so the ship is going this way, the helo's this way. And has to keep up with the ship, and the ship is going up and down, and the blades are close, and I'm just thinking to myself, I don't know how we don't die, right? This is crazy. And and we knew that these helo pilots were like reservists. We knew that they were doing it because they needed quals.
Oh, that's scary.
I know. I was like, oh my gosh. So anyway, we lived. Nobody died. The helos didn't crash. So that was great. But I was nervous because everything that you could possibly have that was like make it harder, being on night vision, being at night, it was choppy, the ship's moving.
Yeah.
Everything was like at play.
It's a lot.
So that was a crazy experience, yeah.
When you're being flown around and everything mission wise, is that typically with the 160th SOAR guys, or yeah,
most of the time? But we also did a lot of stuff with just regular Army helicopters, helicopter units. A lot of times it was with the 160th, but like, try how to explain it. You build relations. Like, the Army owns the battle space, so the generals are in charge. So as the Navy and as SEALs, like, we're kind of like a tool, but we have to be useful to them. And so we have to build good relationships with them. And so once you do, and you're doing operations, like, you're kind of, there's not just unlimited assets out there for you. So you kind of get what you get sometimes. So you're like, hey, I got this op. Can I use this helicopter group, this unit? It's not always the 160th. Most of the time it's actually not, but sometimes it is. And so, we'd fly with just regular, I don't know what you call them, but regular helicopter pilots, and we did a number of missions that were our primary source of transportation was helicopters.
Yeah.
Most of them, everything was Humvees, but some were far enough out that we needed helicopters.
When you're doing VBSS, is that what you said?
Yeah.
When you're doing that, did you do that where you're trying to get on ships that are like 30, 40 feet to the deck?
Oh, yeah. Oh,
That's
yeah.
wild.
It's a long climb.
How long are you on that trying to get up?
Probably a couple minutes, I would say.
Yeah.
It's a long climb, and it's exhausting because you're not. It's not a stiff, rigid ladder. It's like a rope.
Right.
So you're not climbing straight up. You're almost like climbing this way, and so you've got, if you're a breacher or some part of the breacher team, you got your weapon, you've got I always ended up carrying something heavy because as a new guy or something, I'd carry a sledgehammer or something.
Yeah.
You got, and your body armor and everything, your helmet.
Yep.
You're probably at least 50 pounds more than your body weight. And and so it was part of the reason why you need to be in great shape.
Right.
You can't be out of shape doing that. That's for sure. Getting up those ropes.
So there's no way to do that without it being clunky, unless you're coming in with choppers.
Yeah. It's a clunky operation.
What reminds me is like watching, what was that deal in London, the Iranian embassy siege? Like, and how slow everything was going down on it. Like, that was crazy watching that footage. Christopher Whitcomb, the HRT guy that I had on, he was down the street in London when that was going down. So that's crazy. He was just there while it was happening. And that whole thing, you watch documentaries on it, and those guys say, we're lucky that they weren't killing hostages and everything. Because I want to say it took like 18 minutes or something like that to do that whole deal.
Yeah, we always knew that speed was our friend, right? So we sacrificed a lot of, from my perspective, and I was new, and I wasn't privy to all the details of the planning on all these ops, but you could just tell. Speed was the most important thing. So if we wanted to be quiet as much as possible, but there was a point to where if you can't be quiet anymore, you better be fast.
Right.
And so we would clear houses in minutes, like we in and out. And that was our thing. Like, it didn't take us long. Like, speed is your friend. And so when you've kind of given up the element of surprise, like the quiet part, and you're 32 dudes and roll up in Humvees, you're not that quiet.
Right.
So you got to be fast.
So when you're talking about doing snatch and grabs and everything, so what's that like with local people and everything, and as you're trying to go in, quick, quiet, whatever?
I remember the first couple ops we did, it was a little scary because we didn't really know how the people around us were going to take it.
Right.
And I remember being on like the first op we did, and I was like setting security for like the initial breacher team to go in. There's usually like 4 to 8 guys on the initial team that go in, and typically what you do is you somehow you get through the perimeter, whether they have a fence or a gate. Every structure had some kind of wall and they have like little, some kind of deterrent on the top of the wall, like broken glass or something. So most of the time we climbed over. We had
these throwing like broken glass there to hear things fall if you're
no.
over?
It's broken glass that's like glued there. Like it's just trying to deter people from getting in. So
their version of razor wire.
Yeah. It's just cheap version of razor wire or something. Yeah. Or maybe it's a little bit more aesthetically pleasing version of razor wire. But and then what would happen is, those initial 4 to 8 guys would go up, find the front door, and they would plant their charges on the door, because we almost always blew the door in. And then once you blow it, then obviously your speed's important. Right. But you're supposed to try to be quiet up until you get there, because you don't want people coming out of the house and like surprising you. Like then you're kind of compromised. Then you have to kind of just go in. But I remember, so I was setting a perimeter, and I got night vision on it. We did everything at night, so I got night vision on. I'm setting a perimeter just outside of the fence, because we also have to protect ourselves. Once we go in, we got to protect people from coming in on us, right? So my job that night or whatever was just to keep a perimeter. And everybody's job is, unless you're the first 8, and then you kind of funnel in after that. But anyway, the charges blew, and I'm looking out, and we're in the city, and we have I'm looking at a building that's like 8 stories probably. I don't know. And it wasn't a hotel. It's probably some kind of condo type of deal, apartment. And I just see lights.
Lots of options.
Yeah, and I'm like, you don't know what to expect at all.
Right.
Like you just don't know. I'm like, so I see these lights flicker on, a bunch of them, because obviously they just heard this huge explosion. Yep. I'm like, oh man, I don't know what to think. I don't know if they're all gonna start shooting at us.
Right.
And luckily they did, and they were just kind of watching. And I'm just keeping your eye on it. Like that's all you can do. And so we met people that were supportive of us, and we met people that hated us. You were always curious about the people around you, because you never knew. Like it wasn't like a traditional war where people wore uniforms. You never knew who was who. So you had to be careful. And there were some people who really appreciated us, and we tried to treat people as good as we could. We knew, like the saying back then was like, hearts and minds, right?
Right.
We did our best. We still were, we were a bunch of high testosterone guys who were there to do a job, but we did our best to try to win hearts and minds where we could, where we felt it was necessary and deserved. And there were times where we did ops that you could just tell people wanted to kill us.
Yeah.
And those were scary. You never knew who was going to just pull out a gun or whatever, because we'd go through crowds, we'd do patrols. We did this one op where there was a lot of activity going on, and a lot of Army people were getting killed. And so we took, I think if I remember correctly, we took it upon ourselves to say like, hey, let's go in there and let's patrol the area to see if we can't calm some of this down. So we were patrolling through this, like, it wasn't even a neighborhood. It was weird. It's hard to explain. I remember it was dirt roads, but there was like people who lived there, and anyway, patrolling through and daytime, and people just like people just doing their normal lives, like,
right.
And they were just looking at us like they hated us, and like we looked at them like we hate you too.
Yeah.
Because it's life or death at that point. Like you don't know who wants to kill you, and so you have to portray like, I'll kill you. Yep. Like I'm gonna kill you first.
You're both punking each other out.
And so you'd walk by these people, and they'd stare at you, and you'd stare back at them harder, and you're like, don't fuck with me.
Yep.
And so yeah, we survived that. That was good. But crazy different things that we experienced throughout that time, different ops that we did. But almost everything we did, there's a few things we did outside of the city. Took some helicopters to little villages and some cool stuff, but yeah.
In law enforcement, similar contrast, you have that same thing with your gang members, and it's that same game. I remember I was doing a transport. I was down in Houston, Texas, and this Mexican guy, the long shorts, the white socks pulled up, all sleeved out, tatted up on his face. He's walking across the road and just staring me down. Like, okay, we're just going to play this game where we just stare at each other, and then he stops in front of my car and just keeps staring me down, and then just goes on over to the sidewalk, stops, turns, keeps staring. Gosh, this is so stupid. It's like two turkeys, puffing up, trying to impress the ladies. And it's always interesting to me, like how animalistic that game becomes.
Yeah, and you look back and you're young and you don't really understand the world very well, and you have a lot of testosterone, and you think you're going to be a hero, and you get older and you realize you soften up a lot. In a lot of ways, you soften up, and lots of thoughts about that time period, So
I remember, for me, it was such a surreal moment the first time we're hitting a house and I'm pointing a gun at a human. Mm-hmm. Do you have a moment of that to you, like what that was like for you the first time? You're like, oh my gosh, this is real.
No, not really. I mean, it was exciting.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think, that's the feeling that I got.
Yeah.
You train first of all, you're young, so you don't have a whole lot of life experience, but you train whatever adult life you have to kill people. It sounds harsh, but that's your job, is to kill people. So, it just doesn't affect, it just never affected me in any way, like in a negative way. I never really questioned it. It makes me think too, now that I'm older and you see what the government's capable of, and you're like, we were special forces, but we were pawns in a game too. We were just good pawns. Like, we were just capable pawns.
Right.
And we didn't know it. And I think now, they would have told us to go do this mission and kill this person, and that person could have been totally innocent. Who knows? It doesn't matter. We would have done it. That's our job. And so it's a crazy game we play, with the government, the politicians, and they train us up to go do things, and we become their little foot soldiers, and we kind of just say yes sir, and we do what they expect. And if we don't, we get canned. They keep people there who are willing to do that. So the motivations are interesting, because it's not like I didn't go into the military going like, I just want to go kill people that the government tells me to kill. That's not really what I went in. I went in for personal development. I was interested in doing something really challenging, and they develop you into this warrior, and that's who you become. You don't think about, is the person I'm going to kill, is this the right thing? And back then you trusted the government. The government trust between its people and the politicians was pretty high.
Right.
So
they had probably the best support ever.
Yeah, and you just figure, if these guys are telling me, go kill this person, who am I to question that? These guys know what they're talking about, and I have a job to do, and I never even thought about it. This is our mission.
That makes a lot more sense, and I could see how you'd see it that way. And then on the law enforcement side, it's different, because you're not going after bad guys to kill bad guys that are bad, and you've got the green light already. No, this is someone who was just buying a Coke behind me in the gas station 2 weeks ago, and just another person living here. A friend of mine, Andrew Morgan, he was a Marine and recently got into law enforcement. It's been really cool hearing now where he's got that perspective of each of those and just how different the job is, and he understands so much more. Oh, I get why you do this now. I get why you do that now. And that's just been a really cool experience to listen to him as he's grown on the law enforcement side of it. And it changes his perspective on how he does things, even from a training standpoint now, between that and whereas before it was all just military based.
Yeah, they don't want someone who's going to question their authority.
Yeah.
It's just not what they want. They want a group of people who, here's your mission, go execute your mission. And that's what we're taught. None of our core values, nothing that we're ever taught, it's hey, that tells us to, we should really be questioning what these guys, never.
Yeah.
It's our main thing is accomplish your mission. Execute, accomplish your mission. And we don't plan our own missions, but they come from higher up than us. Those operations that we do, the acceptance and the approval come from higher up than us. We're just the group that executes on those, and we're just supposed to execute at a very high level. And that's how we judge ourselves. That's how we score ourselves, not whether or not we went and hit the right play. I mean, yeah, we do. I mean, from a tactical standpoint, if they told us to hit this building and we hit the wrong building, yeah, we obviously failed. But it's not like whether the guy was bad or good necessarily. That's not our job.
You ever have that happen? Wrong house?
Oh yeah, all the time, all the time. We carried around a briefcase of money, so we could give people that we destroyed their front door. Yeah.
I have a story about that. I'll tell you off camera. You'll have to remind me. Briefcase with money.
Yeah, it was some crazy stuff.
You mentioned on your first deployment that you guys did your own intel. Is that like within your small group, or is that just people on the Navy side?
It was within our small group, and I think it was just out of necessity. I think we were one of the first teams to Iraq when we invaded after the invasion, and there was not a whole lot of rules. I mean, again, I was new. I was a new guy.
When did you get over there first?
April 2004.
Oh wow!
So the invasion had just ended. We were settling down, and we were now starting to go after terrorists.
Yeah. After
they invaded and got Saddam and all that stuff. So there wasn't a whole lot of structure yet, and there was. Wasn't privy to all the conversations that my leadership had with higher up leadership, whether it's politicians or generals or whoever. So I don't know how it came about, but it was like, okay, you guys are going to start doing operations, and we ended up just building. We had some attachments, like the Seabees were attached to us. I don't know if they're attached to us or they just happened to be there, but we used the Seabees to build us like this makeshift detention facility, and we would, and it was great. I mean, honestly, it was great. This is how it should always be done. And with probably some supervision from somebody that could be relaying this information to the politicians, right? Because there has to be some accountability,
right?
But that's how. I mean, that was we were so efficient. Like the first operation we did, we got intel from some other intel source somewhere else, and we went and we hit this house, and we got like the gold mine of dudes, gave us everybody else. And I don't know because again, new guy, didn't know all the information. I was just there to hold a gun and kick down doors. But I think we ended up with this first target, and he was just willing to tell us everything we wanted to know. So I don't think we had a place to take him. I think we needed to build up. I don't know how it all turned out, but what happened was that first target, we took the guy off target. We ended up building a facility. We housed him in the facility, and he just kept giving us target after target after target. Wow. And we just kept bringing these people back and into this facility. We had this facility where we had all these people we took off target that were terrorists, and they just kept telling us where everybody else was.
So it's pretty easy to get most of them to talk?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. I mean, these weren't high level. These weren't like Osama bin Laden and his his core group. These were just people causing a lot of problems in the area, shooting rockets, mortars. They were part of cells, but there was all kind of splinter cells all over the place. So we'd go out and get them. We get intel. We go out and get them, and they'd rat on their friends, and we'd go get more people. And that was great because it was really quick, really organic. Like, that's how war should be fought. If that's your mission, is to go get bad guys, that's how they should be fought. With like one or two people who are supervising, saying, with some communications back to DC, making sure rules of engagement are being upheld, but stop with the bureaucracy. Like, it should be very limited. And we were super efficient. We got lots of people, lots of bad guys. So, yeah, I would say, I've learned a lot from that experience. And like, if I ever had an opportunity, which I don't know if I ever want, but I had an opportunity to be in charge of something like that, I would definitely, the way we fight wars now is just stupid. we want regime change. We want all kinds of stupid stuff. Like,
how would you define how it's done stupid now versus how it was?
We go in. We go in. We typically, this is what I saw. We went in the early days. Things got done really quickly because there was no layers of management. It was just like guys on the ground doing their job. They have to have some guidance. That's why I said there needs to be somebody there that can give them guidance on what needs to be done. Like, what's the mission? Because we're just a cog in a machine, really.
So you're kind of just able to dictate what you do and everything?
At that point, as far as I could tell, yeah.
That's wild.
But, but that's a good way to do it. Like, okay, SEAL team, this is your mission. You've got this city. This city is a terrorist hub. Go find terrorists and capture them.
Yeah.
Okay, well, I would go in and we'd do exactly the way we did it. Like, give us a little bit of intel to go off of at first and let us just start generating our own. Like, it's so organic. Like, the prisoners were right there. We slept right next to them. They were giving us intel. We'd bring them back. It was all so fast. We didn't have to send it up a chain of command. We didn't have to wait till the intel came back. Then once you send it up to like this, you send it up, then all these politicians have their hands on it. And I don't know if we do this. It takes time. I remember we were trying to do one operation on a pretty high value target. And I'm pretty sure I'm getting this right, but we missed the window because there's oftentimes there's windows of opportunity to get people, right? You have intel coming in from a source that knows where this person's going to be at a certain time, let's say. And because politicians can't make up their mind and everybody wants to have their hand in it, everybody wants, you miss windows of opportunity. That's what happened on our second deployment. Is there's too many politicians, too many rules and regulations. People were dying because terrorists. We couldn't go get. Here's a dumb rule that happened on our second deployment. Every op we did, we had to have an Iraqi soldier. The fucking stupidest rule, because we had time-sensitive targets we kind of got, but we couldn't find an Iraqi soldier, and it was illegal for us to go on a mission without an Iraqi soldier. Idiots. Like, how dumb can your politicians be? But that was some kind of law. I don't know.
Because they wanted them to feel a part of it.
Well, it was a transition opportunity, right? They wanted to transition us out of there, the Iraqis into there, and someone thought it was a great idea to make sure that every time U.S. military unit went out on an operation that they had to have an Iraqi soldier. Well, there's problems with that if you're not thinking through the situation. One of the problems is, what if you can't find an Iraqi soldier? What if there's not enough of them? What if there's a terrorist threat right there in front of your face and someone's going to die, but you can't go find an Iraqi soldier because maybe they're off doing training? Maybe there's, the Iraqi soldiers, they were lazy. I mean, there was very few that were worth a shit. Sorry, I don't know if I can cuss on here. But
oh, yeah. No.
Very few that were worth a shit.
Unbound.
Unbound, okay. And it was so frustrating, and you just made you mad because we had an opportunity to see how it really worked well.
Yeah.
And then we come back and we're like, what is happening?
All neutered.
We've got Humvees that have doors. Like, we're sitting ducks. We can't go on ops without an Iraqi soldier. And there are a number of other things too, but it was frustrating, very frustrating. That's why I said, like, we were doing 3 to 4 hits a night, and then we went that to maybe you do one a week because there were so many hoops to jump through just to get out the door.
So when you're doing a snatch and grab on a guy, are you trying to collect intel and everything too? Yeah.
Oh, for sure. We go through the whole house typically, just looking for stuff. As a matter of fact, one of my cool moments was can't remember the guy's name. I probably shouldn't say it even if I did. But the first target we ever went on, I was kind of like an intel. It was stupid. I wasn't like an intelligence analyst, but of the group, we had a couple intel guys, and our job was to collect intelligence on target. And the first guy we went after, the first terrorist we went after, I told you we got the intel packet from like some other source, not us. So we went on this guy, and we couldn't, for a long time, we got there were people there, we had them detained. And the guy clearly knew he was a terror. Like, he knew, like, he was nervous because we couldn't find anything in his house to confirm that this was him. So you got to match certain things like IDs, whatever, right? You got to make sure the guy that the intel tells you you're going after is the guy that you're actually getting. So we spent hours on target one time, just going through everything.
You feel like a sitting duck with that too? Like from potential outside threats?
Not really. I mean, depends on where you are. Right. That particular one, I don't think we were, but I remember we were on target and just trying to find something that would match. And I remember pulling one of his kids, and still to this day, it's weird, but he had kids, and they were going to school, and I was going through the kids' books, and I pulled the book, and it was all in Farsi, so I don't even know what it says, but I pulled one of the kids' books off the shelf, and it was like, I don't know what kind of book. It wasn't like a textbook. It was like a book that you could write in. And that was the name of the guy, the last name. The kid had written in English in her book. And that was how we ended up.
That's crazy.
I don't know if it was the only source that we used, but it was one of the sources that we used. And I just remember being on target for hours looking for something.
Yeah.
And we finally I found that. So that was cool.
How wild is that experience, collecting a guy like that with the family around?
It's hard.
Yeah.
I didn't really have a family back then. I was young, just kind of doing, I say it's hard. It really, so much is going on. So much is happening. You're just doing your job.
Mm-hmm.
You really get to the point too, especially after these people blew up the Twin Towers, you just don't have a lot of sympathy for them.
Right.
The kids, it's harder with the kids because you know that they're innocent. But they train you in a way, not overtly, but very under the surface to like your emotion. You can't be emotional. Can't. Otherwise, you're a disaster. If you get emotional on target, you're a liability. So, just do your job.
After you're done with a mission, did you have times where you felt like emotions were at play for you and other guys? Or also, I get it, like in the moment you're just doing your job, but then after there's the whoa and the chats and everything about it. How did that feel to you?
No. I don't ever remember looking back getting upset at any of it.
That's cool.
Yeah.
I feel like everything was done in such a good way with so much support for that whole effort to where it would be easier to put disconnects and walls up in places like that where it's not that big of a deal. And again, contrast to law enforcement, like going and picking up a guy that we know we're looking for and his kids are there and he's been chill and easy to work with. So yeah, you can say goodbye to your kids. You say any dumb stuff about cops and we're going to pull you. But I'll let you say goodbye to your kid without cuffs on and everything, and then we'll walk back around to the other side of the car and everything. You won't see any of it. So maybe talk to your wife and make sure she knows to kind of take him back in another room so that kind of stuff isn't seen. And there's a lot of times where guys are chill enough where you can do that, because that was, I already know these kids are at home where they're being trained to dislike law enforcement and see us as the bad guys, but I always wanted to try and prove to them in other ways, we're taking your daddy. Yeah. But if we can make that to where it's not seen in that light and the negative elements not there, hopefully they'll at least have better memories of those scenarios.
We were never really trained to interact.
Yeah.
That was just not something we ever did. Like, I'm sure as police officers, there's part of your training is how to handle people on target, like how to handle people in general.
It's definitely not enough, and a lot of guys suck at it.
Yeah, and so, but we never had it. Never had any of that. It was just about doing, training for the particular ops, whether it was VBSS or whether it was land warfare, or we had things called IADs and all kinds of different training operations, but we never really trained on how to interact with people on target. Yeah. Not that I remember.
So there's no de-escalation elements that were really at play or needed?
Yeah, when you've got the dude, in hostile situations, but not in peaceful situations, right? Like right. You were trained like how to handle people when they were hostile. Like you cuff them or something.
Pause.
Yeah, I got to pee.
Yep.
That's okay.
If you want, go ahead and unhook.
Oh, yeah, okay.
I don't know why that just did that the other day, and normally it'll stay the whole time.
Yeah.
Tech issue, and we're back. So, yeah, when you're talking about finding that kid's book, is that scenario and other scenarios, I assume you're wrapping up the family and putting them all in one place.
Yeah.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
And as you're there for the target, do you separate them from the family?
Yeah.
Okay.
Males go in one spot and the females and kids go in another.
Okay.
And we leave the females on target. We typically took all the males off target, and then we would leave all the females and the kids.
Gotcha. What age is considered kid versus...
I don't know. I'm probably...
Fighting age male.
Yeah, we'd probably have to make some kind of decision at that point. I don't know. I wasn't senior enough to be involved in that.
Like if a 13-year-old's making menacing faces at you.
I don't know. Like, that's something that my leadership on target probably would make those decisions.
Yeah.
I don't remember there ever being some debate on that at all.
No.
Everybody that we pulled off target that I can remember was, clearly adults.
Yeah. Did you meet a lot of resistance? Was there ever physical, fight elements that had to take place?
Most of the time, no. And especially partly because we were there in the very early days, and they didn't know how to fight yet. They got better and better as they were in the fight constantly.
Right.
So they really didn't know what to do with us. Most structures we went on, it was they didn't want to fight. So we'd go in and I think when you put a explosive on the door and you blow people are so discombobulated, and then that's when I was telling you speed is so important, because if you can get in the rooms faster before they even know what's going on, they don't have time to get their guns or anything like that. Most of the time, everybody slept in the front room.
Really?
It was a cultural thing.
Huh.
So we get most everybody right off the bat. That kind of presented a problem sometimes, because if you're blowing the door, sometimes there's some shrapnel, and so we went on some targets early days. I remember we fixed this, I think, where we had some injuries and our medics had to attend to them.
Right.
Nothing I don't think is serious, but enough to where our medics had to attend to some of the people on target. And sometimes you get old people, they have generations of family there, so all the way from kids to elderly.
Mm-hmm.
And so you got to be careful, but yeah.
Yeah, that's on the LE side. I remember in Florida, there's a guy, it's I was about to go to Bang school, where I was going to get my instructor certs for Bang's explosive entry, all that stuff. And I ended up not getting to go because this deal is a senior guy who pulled me off of that training because, we don't need to be doing this. And they decided to go to no bang use after this. And it's because a guy tossed a bang blind into a room in Florida and threw it in a freaking baby crib. I want to say 80% body burns, something ridiculous. It's no, you can't do that here. And it's a known thing. And you think everybody knows that. And then about 2 or 3 months later, a buddy of mine's telling me of an incident he's on where he's Overwatch precision guy. He's on the backyard of this house. So they're next to a cliff edge. There's basically no backyard. So he's out there with an M40 with one of the McMillan stocks on it. And he's 12 yards from the back glass, and there's 2 kids just sitting in there watching TV on a couch. And he said he sees the light from the upstairs where the team did entry from the top, and saw something down at the bottom of the stairs. It comes down, hits that angle, and he saw something bounce right there, and then boom, it's the bang going off. It's who's doing this? Just threw a bang blind in the basement, and obviously it didn't go on around the corner, but had it gone around the corner, they're also right there on the couch. And you think people know to do this stuff in a certain way, and then still people do some weird things sometimes.
Yeah, it only takes one, one guy to forget or to get stressed out or to not know or whatever. Be cavalier about it. So
the Miami-Dade TV show, the only episode I ever saw of theirs, is a guy who's going to get his first bang toss on a raid, and so I think they raked a window he was supposed to toss it into or something like that. Maybe it's a doorway, and he throws it, and he hits the roof. Doesn't even throw it into the building, which was kind of random in the scenario of how it happened, but crazy. I got banged on our first raid where the guy just locked up running into a fence, and the fence wasn't supposed to be there. Well, some of us just split off from the line and started looking for an opening where we found one immediately, and we start running through, and apparently he just, oh shit, just pulled the bang out and threw it, and I hear something hit right next to my buddy Bennett, and for whatever reason I look at it like a dumbass. Is my first one, and I'm looking directly at this thing when it goes off, and I remember wasn't as loud as I thought, especially outside. It really wasn't loud, not like horribly loud. And the brightness factor, not that big of a deal at night too. But yeah, and Bennett did practically the same thing. He turned sideways and kind of looked at it as it went off as well.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't think we never had any accidents. I mean, there was one accident, but it had nothing to do with that. We were well trained. I remember that was back before like there was really good comms. Like there wasn't really email wasn't something we could use. So like we didn't really get to communicate a lot with our families, but every once in a while we would get to. And I remember, I can't remember exactly what it was, but I think my mom had written me or someone or and you know, she was scared. She was nervous for me. That's a whole nother story, but I remember writing back to her. I can't remember if I don't remember how it even went down, but I remember, you know, just saying like they should be scared of us. Like we had so much confidence in what we did. We trained so well, and and so I partly to try to make her feel better, but also partly like it was true. Like we were far and above, far superior to the people we were going after in training and our level of training. So it gave us a lot of confidence, and we were, you know, I felt like we were good. We were well trained. We had good discipline. We had good leadership. We had good, you know, just guys doing what they're supposed to be doing. It's a really good, we called them platoons back then, but then turned into task units. But it was a really good group of guys that we worked with that first deployment.
If you compare that to sports and say that you were high school seniors on the basketball team, where would you level the competition?
I don't know what you exactly mean.
Like when you're talking about how much stronger you guys were than them, like as far as like their capabilities versus yours.
They were, at that time, they were like a middle school team.
That's kind of what I figured.
I mean, just not even close. Not even close. And we had the element of surprise. We had all kinds of stuff to our advantage too. Yeah.
So most of your work was done at night?
Almost all of it.
Almost
yeah.
all
We
of
did
it.
some stuff that wasn't at night, but most of it, yeah.
And when you run a night vision, were you running just the PBS 14s or duals?
Duals. Yeah. That was back when I think the first issue that we got were monos. I can't remember. Was that 14s? I can't remember. It's been a long time. But they were the monos. And then we all end up getting the duals. It took some time to get used to being on night vision, because night vision, at least at that point, was relatively new.
Mm-hmm. Where it was actually good enough.
It was
to
good
be
enough.
effective.
Yeah, it was like not great, but it was good enough. And like we would do all kinds of stuff on nods, and you're like, your vision just goes to this.
Right.
I remember we would do a lot of driving operations, like some Humvee operations, and not only is your vision like this, but then you got all the dust, because we did training ops in Nevada, and then obviously in the desert in Iraq and stuff. But your just vision is zero. It's challenging. It's challenging to be on night vision, but you get used to it. You do get used to it, and you start to be able to operate effectively. But it takes time.
Yeah. The duals, I feel like, gives so much more confidence.
For sure. Yeah, they're definitely more perspective, but they're still like...
Yeah, you're still... tunnel vision.
And they're not comfortable to wear at all.
Right.
Typically, you want them close to your face, right? So you can get the biggest perspective.
Right.
But then if you're in a vehicle, you're running, you're banging off your face like this the whole time, because your helmet's not perfectly on your head. So they're attached to your helmet. Your helmet's moving forward and back, and they're banging off your face. And
It's crazy all the weight and everything that goes into it, and then having to add counterbalance on the back and everything. I watched a video the other day of a like F1 or whatever, I don't know the cars, the super fast race cars, and one of the drivers, and all the training he was doing because of all the tension that goes on their neck with the helmet. It's crazy. He's laying down on a bench, and he has like this weight system he has around his head and everything, and he's just like laying on his side just doing the neck up and all these different positions. It's like, that needs to be implemented. And guys doing the night vision game, because it'll wear your neck out. It reminded me of first time I was with all that stuff for a whole evening. It was like going to my first rock show and my neck killing me from headbanging. Just because I wasn't used to those type of muscle groups being worked that way.
Yep. Yeah, it's been a long time, but I do remember having a sore neck for that. I mean, those nods are not light either, and your helmet's heavy, and so everything's just weighing down on your face. You have the counterbalance, but then even if you have a counterbalance, your helmet's just heavy now.
Right.
And you're just like, so...
Did you always have an armored helmet, or did you run the bumps at times?
No, we didn't feel like that was something we'd get away with.
Yeah.
But we did have the cut ears, so they try to stick us with the big old helmets, but every single person just cut those things right off. We ended up cutting them, and I learned how to sew. I learned how to do all kinds of stuff when I was in, because like our gear that was given to us, in the early days, like gear wasn't high speed, and so we just modified everything. And so I learned how to sew. I sewed every piece of gear I had. I modified my body armor, my helmet. Everything was modified. Who knows if it would actually stopped a bullet at that point? But
we were taught to sew on everything, pouches, and everything. Just extra stuff there to make sure it was all going to stay.
Yeah, and they were pretty cool. We didn't have to have uniform gear, so he's like, okay, you need to carry, I can't remember, X amount of mags, and this is what you need to carry, so minimum. So make sure you carry that. As long as you carry that, you're cool. Some guys would use, we always had our secondary on us, you had to, but some guys would use drop-down holsters, like leg holsters. I carried it on my hip. I like just like a little concealed, and I wore my gear high enough that I could get to it.
Easy, yeah.
And the higher you wear it, the better balance you have and the better center of gravity. So if you can get everything up high and tight, you can move well. Yeah. If it's low and hanging and banging, and then bang against your pistol, and then you bang against your hips, you want it high and tight.
Were you in during the transition period when they had guys went from 2-strapping to a single strap on the drop legs so they could get it up higher?
I don't remember too much about that. I think we just had the 1 strap, if I remember, but that was such a pain. I hated it. I just don't like anything on me very much. Like anything hanging off me. I don't even really like a watch. I don't wear any jewelry. That's just how I am.
Yeah.
So I was very particular at how I wanted my gear. I wanted it really tight. When I ran, I didn't want to feel it move. And so I got rid of that. As soon as I knew I was okay to get rid of that drop holster, I just got rid of it.
Yeah.
And I wear this really cheap, lean plastic hip holster right on my belt, and it was right between my gear. And so I could draw it real quick. And I was way quicker on my hip, too, than I was down here, because you had this weird freaking safety latch.
Right.
It just didn't feel natural. So, yeah.
That's where guys finally got to where they moved it up for the longest, because they did those 2 straps, and it had it hanging way low, and it's almost like, how low can you go for a cool factor? And then eventually they started taking off the top straps and pulling that other one as high as you get it in the crotch, and that way it's up tighter. But I remember one of the first times I was training with a drop leg, I went down and dropped the 2 knees, and I ran dry on my rifle, go to grab my handgun, not realizing that it's going to follow my leg with that cant. And I was like, well, that's pretty awful.
That's a really good point. I didn't think about that. But yeah, if it's on your hip, it's on your hip no matter what position.
Yep.
You're going to be able to reach it every time. And we train that way. I guess you could train with it on your leg if you really want it on your leg. But I just felt like we always were like, my natural reaction is to come right to my hip.
Yeah.
So I always wanted to make sure that I could wear my gear in a way that I could get to my secondary without it impeding in my other gear and it be on my hip. And because, when we first got to the team, you're just issued what you're issued, and you just kind of wear what you wear. And we had these drop holsters, and you try to run. Like we do what are called, let's say, for instance, IADs. IADs are immediate action drills, but they're basically, if you get contacted, let's say you're just patrolling through the desert, you get contacted, how do you move out of that? There's a lot of running. There's a lot of moving, and you're carrying all this gear, and you got guys with the M60s and saws and just ammo everywhere. And it's like, how do you move? How do you get out of that? And so I didn't, one of the things that you realize is like, you're trying to run and you've got this sidearm that's just flopping around on your leg. I already have all this ammo. I already have all this like M60 ammo. Like the last thing I need is my sidearm flapping around and flinging off. And so you go through the process of doing that a couple times, like, I don't like that, and you just change it, and then you just start changing it until you were like, okay, my gear is tight now. It takes time, but everybody started with that drop holster because that's what they issued, and then you just go buy your own stuff. That's what almost everything that I wore, I bought. Almost very little of it was issued because they just issued. Back then there was nothing good.
Right.
I mean, I think probably the people who are doing good gear now, probably most of those guys were kind of from my era, whether they were either part of the military or they were like part of a gear company who were watching us, like modify our gear the right way so that we could actually operate properly without having all this crap all over the place. There was a lot of development that happened during that time.
Oh, it's crazy. It's so insane, like how many different things there are now just from that time period. I have one of the old Blackwater catalogs for their employees to where they're selling their gear, and it is like the grossest of Condor just garbage. It's so, and like that's another brand. Condor now makes, I wouldn't take it for war use, but they make like really good looking rigs and everything. They're all modernized now and small. That was the thing that took me forever. Like I started out running I had a low pro plate carrier to carry my plates, but I had originally started running an LBV where your mags and everything actually down a lot lower. And of course I had the drop leg with that because the system was coming down. But it was so weird to me transitioning to a plate carrier with my mags on the plate carrier, because I just felt so insane pulling mags from all the way up here after I'd been, running from a belt with pistols and then eventually getting into the rifle game and then pulling from my stomach. So I always liked that LBB. And one of my favorite things about it for chill time, it had that zipper down the middle, and the channel was just wide enough, and with the double mag pouches, you could take your rifle and slide your mag right down in between those and literally just take your hands off, play this game, and just let the rifle sit and be held by that. It was always nice.
Yeah, we were always doing crazy stuff. I remember one of my buddies, Chris, he had rigged up because he was carrying the M60, and carrying that thing's, there's no, if I remember correctly, there's no sling or anything. You're just carrying it.
That's nuts.
And we're doing, training ops, and you're out there all day for a week carrying this thing. You're like trying to figure out a good way to carry it. Well, he devised this like sling system instead of a sling that went around, because have a sling around your gear. Gosh, it's just so much crap. He's like, I got to get rid of crap. So he like had this little hook on his gear that he just devised, and it's like a hook that he just hooked the gun on, and it just kind of sat there.
That's awesome.
Like, dude, that's cool.
It's like using one of the HK hooks or something.
Yeah, I don't know what he used. He probably just bought it from the store. Right. I mean, we didn't have anything. So he just went and probably bought something, sewed it on real quick, and it's like he just hooked it in. Like, dang. So
it reminds me of a little 550 cord sling guys would do, just attaching up on their kit. What handguns did you guys use?
SIG 226.
Yeah. What do you think of it?
I love it. I mean, I love it because that's what I know.
Yeah.
I really don't have a ton of experience with anything else. I mean, I have a number of other pistols, but I have so much trigger time on that thing.
Yep.
So I'm so used to it. The decock, which is, you don't know, but it's so unique to the SIG that I'm just so used to, the decock mechanism.
I was obsessed with MP5s and M9s, and I wanted to get an M9 when I was going to the academy, and you couldn't get them with night sights. At the time, Bretta said you could buy our gun from a store, then send it in your slide, and 6 weeks later we'll send it back where they'll drill it and put the tritium inserts in it, because that's back when the sights were fixed. And that was the reason I didn't get a Beretta. And I remember chatting with some of the cops out at the airport, and they're like, why don't you just get a SIG? I was like, what's a SIG? So I started looking into this. It's like, well, it's a Beretta, but cooler, and it'll have night sights on it. So I start flipping through their website, and then I see this one model that has cocking serrations out on the front too, which was not a thing on guns hardly at all at the time. And I thought it looked so cool with the cocking serrations out front, and it was the original 226 Blackwater. And that's what I ended up buying, and it came with 5 mags. I needed 6 for the academy, so I had to just buy one more mag. And that gun I have absolutely loved. I've shot the crap out of it. It's had, there was, I think, a total of 8 jams, and that gun's round count's around 40 to 46,000 rounds now. Shot it so much, not understanding certain maintenance that I understand now, like a recoil spring, I think they say swap it every 9,000 rounds, and I went to like 17,000 rounds, and look, it's still working. Well, I should probably swap it because I'm well past that. I didn't realize that's also another job it has, is to keep the gun from slamming around too much. So when you're wearing that out, you're tearing up your gun. So around 22,000 rounds, I cracked the locking block because the damage is already done from it slamming to the rear way harder. But that was a cool learning point, and that's one of the things that really interested me in armor side and learning all the details about how the guns work and everything. Crazy world.
I wish we would have had the 228 because it was the shorter version, if I remember correctly. It's either
229 now.
229 now.
Yeah, I was gonna say I want to say it's a single stack version of it. I don't know.
I think it was the 226 is at a 5-inch barrel or a 6-inch barrel.
It's 4.6.
4.6.
And then the 229 is, I think, right at 4.
Yeah. So it would have been better for us to have a little bit leaner of a pistol. I don't think I ever drew my pistol in combat.
Yeah.
You never know, of
right?
Course. But
right.
It would have been nice to have something a little leaner because, again, you're trying to fit all your gear on nicely. So for me, you have almost a 5-inch barrel versus a 4-inch barrel or something. An extra inch would have made a big difference.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Yeah,
it definitely would. I've carried 229 a ton over the years too, just like as a CCW gun, and it's way easier to carry than a 226.
Mm-hmm.
I wish they would follow what they're doing with the micros on the 360s and do a classic P series that's microed like that now with that type of mag capacity. I would buy that in a heartbeat because I love the Ps.
Yeah, they're good guns. They treated us well.
So how many deployments did you do?
I did 2 deployments. I mean, they were broken up a little bit, so I've been to a lot of different places, but 2 major deployments. I was in South America, as I kind of mentioned before. I did Paraguay and Colombia, just to fulfill some obligations that we had down there to help do some training for their special forces. I've been to Korea.
How was all that down in South America? What was that like?
It was cool. I mean, we just went down there and trained them. Their special forces units in Cartagena and then in Asunción, Paraguay.
Were they good?
I'm trying to think. No. As a matter of fact, if I remember correctly, the Paraguayans were better, actually.
Yeah.
But I think we were training, if I remember, like the Marine equivalents in Colombia, and with Paraguay, they were their special operations guys. So yeah, it was fun. I mean, it's a cool experience. But so I did that. I was in Korea for, I think, close to a month. South Korea, doing some kind of big coordinated training exercise. But my 2 main, and I was all over the Middle East. I've been in all kinds of different countries in the Middle East, but I did most of my work in Iraq. I spent about a year in Iraq total.
Yeah.
Maybe a little more-ish, but close to a year. Yeah.
Did you get to do any interesting, fun world travels as part of that?
Yeah. We, in 2006, George Bush made this trip to Pakistan. I can't remember what it was even for, but some trip to Pakistan. It was a big deal because he had announced it. Most of the time when presidents move, they, especially if it's in war zone, they don't announce it, right? For safety reasons. But he announced it for some reason. So the Secret Service actually was like, hey, we need help. So they called us somehow, not me, I was just a nobody, but my leadership somehow.
Just randomly to you. Hello?
I just was along for the ride. They called my leadership somehow and was like, hey, we need help. And president's going to be in Pakistan on this X and X date. You're in Iraq, you're close. We know that you guys have experience doing some of this protection detail. Will you come out and help us? And at that time, this was our second deployment, and that's when like rules and regulations over there was ridiculous. Like I said, we were doing like a mission a week. It was like, okay, yeah, sure, let's do something else because this is stupid. So, we went out to Pakistan. We got there, if I remember correctly, like 9 days early because we had to do an advance. So, like, if you have any knowledge of like Secret Service type of stuff, they do an advance. They have an advance. They go out and they scout the area, make sure everything's good before the president lands. So we worked with the Secret Service on that. So we spent some time in Islamabad, Pakistan for a week, and then the president flew out in his Air Force One. It was super cool experience, and we got to do some protection with him. We were in helicopters around his motorcade. We were actually in vehicles when his plane landed, and we did our thing, and then we quickly transitioned to helos. We were like the Overwatch, so if anything happened, we would fast rope out of these helos and help support the Secret Service. So through his whole trip, basically an entire day, we were just hovering in helos over the top of the motorcade, and nothing happened. So we didn't get to do anything cool, but that was a cool experience. Yeah. So and then somehow we got word that he wanted to meet with us, which was cool because it was a cool picture opportunity. Yep. So. We staged in some park somewhere, and he came by, and I remember this is one of the coolest things. So we're sitting there, I think there's 10 of us or something like that, and we're waiting for his motorcade to pull up, and so we see him. He pulls up. If I remember correctly, he just opens the door. Maybe he had someone open the door for him, I can't remember, but he gets out and he goes, "Kicking ass for America." And it was so cool because it's cool to see the guy who's in charge. Yes. And it wasn't like it was a manly thing. Like we're manly, masculine dudes. Like we don't want him to come over and be all like sentimental. Like do something cool.
Yeah, well, that's.
And he's
cool,
like kicking ass for America.
Yeah.
Like, fuck yeah,
that's awesome.
So that was really cool. And he came over, and we got a bunch of pictures. Him and I think it was Condoleezza Rice, his wife Laura.
I've worked for her, did a job for her with Secret Service.
Yeah.
So attached really to, cool. I was not Secret Service. Let me clear that up.
Yeah. Yeah. So that was a really cool experience, like getting a picture with the president. And I just happened, like the way we were standing, he just kind of walks right in the middle of us, and I just happened to be there. So I'm standing right next to him. I got all these really cool pictures of me standing right next to Bush and shaking his hand, and so that was a cool experience. Have that up in my office, and my mom has that picture in her house. And
that's cool.
Yeah.
So you respected him as a leader?
I did.
Let's talk about that.
Okay.
and Cheney as well.
Yeah, you must have probably seen that post I didn't. You didn't? Okay.
No.
Yeah. I was mentioning before that, you're just like you're just doing a job, and the politicians are kind of using you the way they want to use you, and things change. Politics has changed a lot, Yeah. It wasn't too long ago where conservatives were more of the party of war. You could say war, you could say like defense. Use a lot of different words, but
right.
And that's changing, which I'm happy about. I was young and eager to just do something cool, and so you just believe what people tell you. Or half the time you don't even think about it. You don't even think about it. You're just doing a job. But now you get older and you start to realize and try to, you have your own kids, and like you think about your kids and if they were in the situation I was in, and it's pretty clear now that the Iraq war was we should never have been there. And I have a lot of friends who died, of course, we all do. Everybody who served there has friends who've died. And you just start to question those types of things. Never question them during, because that was just your job. We didn't question the government back then too much, but now we do. COVID changed that all.
I don't think I think the whole country is so in support of that at the time.
Yeah.
And we had good reason to be in support of it.
Yep. Yeah, and we go in there and we try a regime change, and we just realize that doesn't work. Like, other people don't want our values.
Yeah.
And you can go and say, well, Saddam Hussein killed all these people. Yeah, a lot of people kill a lot of people. Like, it's just how the world has worked for a long time. But you think we're going to go in there and intervene and just, deliver our values to these people who have like thousands of years of history in this in this different culture? Like, it's not going to happen.
Well, a lot of those countries, is Iraq divided up like Afghanistan is, where it's like tons of little different village groups where they kind of self-govern in ways to where to get everybody in one plan?
Well, there's Sunni and Shia there, and they don't agree. But Baghdad's a big city, and there's a lot of big cities. I mean, it didn't look, you could tell it's not America, but it's a civilized place. Mm-hmm. It wasn't like a slum. Baghdad wasn't a bad place. There was a lot of nice places, a lot of nice houses. They were relatively sophisticated in a lot of ways. So, Saddam had did a bunch of bad things. There's no doubt, and he had his issues with the Kurds, but that's how people have ruled in that region for a long time. And is it up to our standards? No, of course not. But is us interfering with that the right thing? Surely not. I don't know if we ended up going in there for oil. I really don't know to this day what the real motivation was, whether it was because Cheney had this big Halliburton company that made a ton of money off the war because he was supplying all the logistics and stuff like that.
That's still so crazy that even happened.
Yeah.
And I thought it was just the food, and I thought that was bad enough, thinking he just had food services, but he had it all.
He had a lot. I don't know all the details, but I definitely know he had food services because we ate from him every day.
Yep.
Yeah.
I didn't realize how big contracting was, not just on your trigger pullers, but all the stuff that's contracted out. And I remember reading, I want to say around 2007, 2008, there was over 550 U.S. contracting companies working in Iraq and Afghanistan.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
Sure. It's a big machine.
Yeah.
It's a big machine. So I don't know what the decision, why they did what they did, but the fact that we went in there, and you can, in hindsight, it's always 2020.
Yeah.
We never should have been there.
You mentioned the Kurds. Were you ever up around Erbil or in their area? Did you work with the Kurds?
Mm-hmm.
How were they?
Yeah, they were awesome.
Really?
They were super squared away.
What are they?
They were not like the Iraqis, from my experience. They were squared away.
Really?
The Iraqis were total turds. They didn't want to work. They didn't take anything seriously. They wanted to spend. They spent all this time on vacation and not working. Yeah, they were turds. But
so
the
they
Kurds
had money to do that?
What's that?
So they had money to do that?
I'm not sure how the money flowed there. I just know that when we were trying to train them, because our second deployment, there was some. They wanted to try to get it. They wanted the turnover. That's true. They should. The government should want us out of there. And so part of our job was to try to help train them, and they were useless. I'm like, well, we're never getting out of here. These people don't want this.
Right.
And maybe it was not because they were useless, but maybe because they didn't care. They didn't want to. They didn't want us there. Like, I'm not going to put some effort into something that I'm not for. Maybe that was it. I don't know. But yeah, they were totally useless.
How did you handle the extraction?
What do you mean?
Like the news when we were leaving Iraq?
I don't know. It's like I said before, it's probably not a great trait, but you just don't get over emotional about anything. You keep pretty even keel. I don't know. My thoughts have changed over time about Iraq. In a way, it still kind of made me who I am. So I'm not I'm not mad.
No.
But you look at how things progressed and why they ended up the way they did, and you look at the politicians, and it's made me really think this particular. I watch a lot of, not like a war buff, but I really like World War II, and I like Russian history and American history, and you see a lot of the things that the Russian military did, very atrocious things to civilians. The same thing with the Germans and all over that region during World War II and before, they would just do terrible things to civilians. And you just think, like, what would I have been capable of doing if I was told it was okay? Like, what would I have done if it was accepted?
Yeah,
or
where's your line?
Yeah. And you really quickly realize, like, unless you have good leadership and people who are saying this is not okay, as a young kid, you don't really know. Like, you just are kind of doing what your leadership is doing.
Makes
like,
sense.
if that's okay, then that's okay. So it's hard to think, but, if we were going out and killing civilians in war, and that was what was accepted, would any of us have kind of stopped and thought? Maybe we would have. I'm not saying we wouldn't have. I'm just saying that I think there's a decent chance we would have. So anyway, what I'm getting at is the people that really should be held accountable, because the way they train us, I hate using the word brainwashing, but it's a decent word to use. They break you down, they strip you down, and they retrain your brain how they want you to react.
Right.
They don't want you to think on target. They don't want you to think about, is this right or wrong? Do what I say. Here's the mission. Accomplish your mission. Your number one focus is to get this done. Period. So and that's really the truth. And what in that case, the people who should be fully 100% held responsible are the people who are making the decisions on the strategic decisions on what to do. Politicians. And I don't want to. It's not like I'm trying to like divert blame from any of any soldiers or anything, but just the way that things go down, just the way that you're trained. You're there to do a job, and I think you just have to put the vast majority of that blame on the politicians. Even in like situations like in Vietnam, where you hear some stories of the U.S. soldiers like shooting kids, whatever. Like, you've been in those situations where, I don't know. You just like, you have to have leadership that tells you what is acceptable and what is not. Otherwise, things like that happen. People get desperate. People, like, guys, you're trained to kill people. That's your job, because you're trained to kill people. And so you have to have real good, clear leadership on that. And if you don't, things like, these operations in, World War II, where the Russians and the Germans were just slaughtering civilians, that happens. That'll happen if you don't have clear leadership. And so I've really started to realize that. And it makes me, the more I think about it, the more frustrated it gets when you hear things like Jane Fonda and how they treated the military vets when they came back. It's like, these guys are just doing what they were told.
Right.
And you should be really pissed off at the politicians. These guys literally went out and put their lives on the line just to execute a mission. And they were executing a mission someone else told them to execute. And things they get difficult. Like, you're trained to kill. So you got to be very careful. But anyway, my thought about that has really changed. I'm not the type of person who tries to push blame on anybody else to take responsibility for your own actions. I'm 100% that way, but I just think back when I was young and very vulnerable to whatever our mission was, we would do it. Yeah. So if your mission is to go kill a bunch of civilians, okay, that's my mission. Someone's got to be making those decisions. I'm not thinking about it. I'm just going to do what they tell me to, so. Yeah.
2-part question. Would you want your kids to be in the military? And your views on politics, how does that affect your choice on that?
If my kids decided they wanted to go into the military, I'd support them. It's hard because you see what's going on with the politics now in the military. Like, they're focused on like DEI stuff rather than actually training to be a warrior. And you can't predict that. Presidents come and go, and they have different things. So yeah, I would support my kids going. I think it was a great thing for me. I learned a lot about myself. I learned how to persevere, how much pain I could take. And most kids nowadays don't learn any of that. Most kids are stuck on their video games or whatever, and they just, little bits of pain is really hard for them. I think in life, the amount of stuff that you can accomplish is directly proportional to the amount of pain you can take.
Makes sense.
So if you're not used to pain, and I'm talking not just physical pain, but mental pain, struggle, stress, you're not going to be able to do much in life. You're not going to be able to accomplish much. And the military is really good at putting you in stressful situations, and so that's good for young people, I think. As far as politics, it's crazy to see a lot of these, you call them neocons now, but Republicans who are like siding with Kamala Harris and the war in Ukraine and all this. And it is interesting to me to even think, like, supported the war in Iraq, but now I'm like against all the wars that are going on now in Ukraine. And I think one of the reasons why that happens is because when you see war firsthand and you get a chance to like look back at it, you realize things that people who've never been to war, I would guess, I don't know this for sure, but I would guess it, I realize things about war that people who've never been to war, you just can't realize that.
Correct.
And then you start to form your opinion, like war should be absolutely the last thing we ever do. And I would say the biggest driver for me is my kids. Like, I don't want my kids dying in a war. Surely don't want my kids dying in a war, especially one that's not justified. Like, very few wars in history have been justified for our kids to go die. Like, gosh, could you imagine?
Right.
I mean, it's the worst thing you could imagine. And you think back, like all the young men, some women, who've died in the wars over the years, and how their parents and the families deal with it. It's the most destructive, disheartening thing you could think of. And so we're stupid. It's good to be trained for war. Like my stance is, you need to be able to go to war if you absolutely had to, but you shouldn't go unless you absolutely have to. You should be trained, well armed, but do everything you can to stay out of it, because it's not worth killing your population for. It's like with Ukraine. Like, what are they there for? Why are you I get it, you're trying to defend if you believe the mainstream media, you think that they're defending their nation. Okay, so, but do you really think you're going to win? You just sacrificed 500,000 young men, and you're not going to win. You can't win against Russia. They got 100 million more people than you.
Isn't that crazy, knowing that the outcome, you can see what it is already?
Yeah. And
to think of how many people had to die in order for everyone to just, finally accept it?
So dumb.
It's crazy.
So dumb. And the American politicians are so selfish and just compromised.
Well, I don't think... I don't know a ton of everything of what's going on within certain wars. I try to keep up on what I can, but it's like pulling out of Afghanistan and the way that was done obviously was horrible. But it's like, what was it all for in the first place?
That's the problem. I mean, you look at this 20-year war we had, and like, what did we accomplish? We spent an immense amount of money. A lot of our sons and daughters died, and what did we get? So you have to get smarter from that. You have to learn from these things.
But I don't think they will, because I think the whole idea is just it's profitability within major corporations where politicians' pockets are lined, and it's the desired outcome that we know is correct and what should be happening, at least what we think from our political views and everything. That's never in the picture for them, because it's not making them the money that this is.
I would hope that that's not true, but I do believe that it probably is true for many politicians, that they somehow, whether it has to do with their lining their own pockets, which I think a lot of them probably are, or it's about votes, whatever, I don't know, but that's probably the motivation, because it's hard for me to imagine what is the motivation to encourage Ukraine, a nation that's not even has almost zero impact on the United States and the people of the United States, say, encourage them to go to a war that they could never win.
Right.
It seems ridiculous.
And again, I think there's a mission there. I think the mission is use U.S. assets with equipment and money to then, and you see all that money that Ukraine's getting, everyone thinks, oh, Ukraine's getting this money. No, they're getting an allocated amount of money they have to spend on U.S. assets to where those big businesses are still making a bunch of money off of it, right? So I think there's that element because they can play the profiteering game on it. But then I think if you can minimize your enemy, you're growing. And I think that's really all it's about, is just utilizing another country, ultimately a proxy war where we're not having to put American soldiers on the ground at the rate that we have in the past. I feel like it's a smarter way to do that if that's what they're wanting to do, is make money, make Russia smaller, which makes us bigger. I feel like that's really all. I feel like that's all there is to it.
Yeah, I think there's probably some element of it that they want to try to just keep destroying Russia little bits at a time because they're a superpower. I don't think the way they're going about it is the right way. I mean,
I feel like we're prepping to try and do that with Thailand, with China. I feel like that's the whole same game right there.
Yeah, I mean, you look at Russia. Russia they've been just internally destroyed for 100 years. Like, just devastated internally. You know, Bolshevik Revolution, October 25th, 1917. The communists take over. And since then, they've been a disaster. They lost an immense amount of people in World War II. Stalin, Lenin was killing people, then Stalin came in and killed lots of their own people. They've had territories, they lost territories. They were the Soviet Union with all the territories around Russia. And Cold War ends. The whole reason why NATO was designed created in the first place was so that we could protect European countries from Russia. Cold War ends, Russia's pretty much on its knees. And the only thing that they said, the Russian leadership, I can't remember, it was Gorbachev, I think, or something, it was like, all I want is for you guys not to make these Eastern Bloc countries NATO. And if you think about it from their perspective, that makes a lot of sense, right? I mean, You remember Cuban Missile Crisis when Russia put missiles in Cuba? Yep. We didn't like that too much, did we? And now we're telling Russia, like, we're going to line your borders with our allies and most likely nukes on your entire western and southern border.
Right, and now we have China talking to Cuba about doing the same thing to us.
It's like, who do we think we are?
Yeah.
Like, I get it, like, they have nukes and all this stuff, but do you think, like, we're not just provoking them? No, it's so dumb.
South Park nailed it with the titling of their movie. Team America, World Police.
Yeah, I think we just operate like we have, like, we're the world police, and, like, there's nothing that we can do that's wrong, and, like, everything that we have to have all the power everywhere. Like, of course, if you corner, like, a cat, the cat's eventually going to jump and it's going to attack. Yep. And I feel like that's what we're doing with Russia right now. Yeah, people say, oh, Putin's a bad guy. Yeah, he's probably a bad guy. It's just like Saddam Hussein. They kill a lot of their own people. That's just how things have been done forever. Like, can you expect Putin to do anything different since that's what he's known his whole life? That's the leadership that he's had. They came from Stalin, man. Stalin killed 60 million people.
Good gosh.
Insane. I mean, starved them, murdered them. So he's way better than that. And you got to think, like, if think of it from a human perspective, like, all you're trying to do as a man with your kids is just be a little bit better than your dad, because that's what you know. You can't be perfect. So it's like Putin's there, like, he's doing what he knows. Yeah, he's corrupt compared to our standards, but shit, he's an heir of Stalin's, and the era of Stalin. and all that. So like, okay, give him a little grace. What's the worst case? What we're doing in provoking him, I think, pushing him into a corner is like, he's got his finger on, he's got lots of nukes. He's got more than we do. So I don't know, man. I don't know if our politicians think that that's what's happening, or if they're like excited about it. Like maybe they want a nuclear war. I don't know. But I think it's dumb.
It's a terrible idea. It's one of those moments where I hope aliens are real. When you read about the stuff where they're showing up at nuke sites and everything, and they can just...
Yeah.
Yeah, you guys thought you had all that, but nope. Shut it all down.
Yeah, so I don't know. I think we just think we're just like the best, and nothing can happen. Like whatever we say goes, and we're gonna have nukes wherever we want them, and we're gonna put our soldiers and troops wherever we want them, and you're gonna deal with it. And like how does a relationship work when you have one person in the relationship that's dominating the other person, the other person literally cowering?
Yeah,
like it's not a two-way relationship. So
no, and eventually you've got so much pent-up aggression and anger and frustration where they're ready to fight back.
And I'm not saying that we shouldn't be prepared to protect ourselves.
Agreed.
But our posture is all wrong.
Yeah, that's a good way of putting it.
Yeah,
I like that. I think we just found a short. Man. I want to keep talking about that, but I also want to move along.
Yeah.
So let's talk about business.
Okay.
Talk about the family business and how things went from there to where you are now.
My grandfather started the business in 1973. He really invented the fiberglass stock. It was an idea he had. He was working at Motorola. I don't know all the details, but I just know he was working at Motorola. And at that time, Motorola was working with fiberglass technology, and he kind of adopted that. And he's like, hey, I think I can make a fiberglass stock. My grandfather had grown up shooting. He grew up in Arizona. Right back, there's nobody there, and he's just a shooter and always wanted to shoot. Went into the military, the Air Force, just crew chief, nothing. He wasn't like any shooter. But he always shot, for fun. And he just did that his whole life. And when he got out of the military, he went to work for Motorola and found this process that he thought might be good for a stock. Better than the traditional wood stuff that was traditionally used. So my grandfather started this business, and at first it was just a business to like make stocks for his friends, and he was a competitive shooter, and kind of worked. I mean, really great stocks, and word kind of got around, and it was back when kind of Vietnam era, just after Vietnam, and they had realized some lessons learned there that they needed like more what I don't even think they had termed yet back then, but like sniper rifles, and they were using like Hathcock was. Using Mod Deuce, and then they had these hunting style rifles, and they were using M14s, but they didn't really have a designated sniper rifle. So, my grandfather was doing some cool stuff on this competition side. So I think somehow, I can't remember how, but I think the military somehow approached him. I don't know how they knew about him, but they did, and they kind of teamed up to build the first what they call the modern day sniper rifle, the M40A1. And so my grandfather, not only did he design and build the stock for them, but he also consulted on the entire project, because my grandfather was like an expert in not just rifle stock making, but all of like precision shooting. He also, I know his brother was making barrels, and I think my grandfather knew how to make barrels too, and just he had all this knowledge about guns and making guns and different parts of the guns and what made them shoot. And so you turn this competition where you're just kind of laying there in a very comfortable position to like, how do we turn that into something that's more of a wartime fieldable. Yeah. So yeah, that happened, and that's really what set McMillan off on the path that made them kind of the elite. And it's kind of mid 70s when that happened, and then they just had the Marine Corps contract forever, and that just really was such a feather in their cap.
Yeah.
And just always was kind of a leader in that way. My dad took the company over in like the mid 80s. I can't remember what year, 83 maybe. My grandfather was like, he was the tinkerer, the kind of the engineer. he was always like messing around on the machines, trying to make better product. My dad wasn't. My dad was more of a marketer. And so once my dad took the company over, he just put a lot of his effort and time and money into marketing. And that's what really grew the company, because my grandfather wasn't that way. My grandfather was just kind of like this kind of raw entrepreneur.
Yeah.
And my dad took the company over and really like started expanding on the brand to like more commercial market, and not just military and this small little competition, but everywhere, hunting. And they started making different stocks that were like hunting stocks and stuff. So, spirals, and, they just kind of maintain their dominance throughout, 2000, 2005, 2010. Then at that point, some other companies started coming on the scene, and now they share that with a number of other companies. But yeah, they were top of their field for a long time. I think they're over 50 years old now. So.
And what an iconic look too. It's so recognizable by anyone who's a gun guy. That's cool.
Yeah, a lot of people, like, if you're a gun guy, most everybody knows that name.
Yep.
So it's cool. It's cool to be part of that.
The Bennett took me to the shooting range with his to let me shoot his, and that was the first time ever shooting like an actual sniper rifle, or a side of hunting guns that I grew up around and everything, and it was such a cool experience. I've always loved those.
Yeah, and there's so much, it's such a big business now. There's so many different stock makers, and sniper rifles, or kind of high-end hunting rifles, or anything with like a lot of gadgets. It's precision firearms. It's a big deal now. There's a lot of money flowing in that area now, and a lot of businesses attracted to making product for that. And a lot of customers spending a lot of money on that. So it wasn't always the case, with my family company, that it was a small, pretty niche company for a long time.
Mm-hmm.
And then it just kind of exploded. And the whole industry exploded, like around, pretty much after the war. It was weird.
Right, like 2010-ish, everything was huge. Yeah, and everything changed, and everybody, like any accessory you could imagine for an AR, whatever degree angle you want to light, it was so wild seeing all that happen. It's funny to me, just a couple of years ago, maybe 2 or 3 years ago, Surefire finally made that pivot mount where the light can hinge. Mm-hmm. Why was it? How did it take us that long to figure that out? Like, you've got a 45 degree, a 50 degree, a 62 degree, like all these different degrees, and Surefire's like, it's like, that was, every now and then I'm blown away by something that's so simple that would be an amazing game changer, and how late it comes into the game. Yeah. And there's like we talked about that at dinner last night, that everybody's an idea guy versus the people who actually put the idea into place. And that's been me forever in guns, and it's been amazing watching different ideas actually come to light, where people had actually made some of them.
Yeah, it's hard. Making stuff's hard. Yeah. I ended up starting Grayboe in 2014.
Why? So you had a family business. Mm-hmm. How did we get to Grayboe from?
Well, my dad and I had always had a pretty rocky relationship, and so after I got out of the military, I did go work for him for a little bit, and we ended up starting a business together. We really tried to work together. I mean, I was the third generation. And so I really thought it was kind of obligated to at least go make a try at it. And so we spent about 8 years working together. Yeah. No, it was more than that. No, it was 7 or 8 years. Yeah. And we just kind of got to the end. We're like, we just couldn't do it. 7, 8 years, not nothing. So the problem was I spent my entire adult life outside of the military learning about rifles and rifle stocks. I made the choice I don't really want to work with him anymore, and I think it was mutual, but I didn't know anything else. So I had some other options. There's a lot of other things that I was interested in doing, but ultimately I ended up pursuing business, and stocks was what I knew, and I had an idea, and I talked to my dad about this. I said this is what I wanted to do, and he was cool with it. As a matter of fact, he was going to be a partner in the business until I had another partner that I brought on who was stupid. You live and learn, right? But he didn't like my other partner. My other partner was an idiot. I look back now. I didn't know that then, but should never have even had him on. He was useless, and and I pay for it big time. But anyway, he didn't like. That's what happened. He didn't like my other partner, and so he's like, he just backed out of the whole thing. But I'm like, well, I've already, at that point, we had already spent money. We were already developing, and I'm like, I'm doing this. And he's like, yeah. So we ended up doing it, and the goal was to make a product that was, the McMillan fiberglass stocks, basically every stock they make was one-off, custom. Like, you can basically put anything wherever you want on the stock, and the way that it travels through the production process is clunky and tedious. You need a lot of people to touch the stock before it actually gets shipped out, and turns out that's one of the reasons, that's the main reason why the stocks are expensive, and they take 6 months to build and ship. So we wanted to kind of fix that and see if we could make stocks that were just as high quality or even more higher quality, but do it in a way that was much faster, much more repeatable.
Something you could scale more.
Something much more scalable. So that was the whole concept of Grayboe. And, the initial thought was, well, McMillan wasn't very good at supplying what we call OEMs, but they're like your big rifle manufacturers, like Winchester, Remington, Bergara, these types of companies. There's too much volume, too much margin. McMillan just wasn't good at it, and that was a huge.
You're talking about doing like a partnership deal where they're releasing the gun with the stock on it?
No, they would buy the stock from us, and they would launch their rifle with our stock on it.
Right, that's what I was meaning.
Yeah. So and that's big.
And they couldn't do that?
Yeah, because they couldn't get the prices nor the quantity in the time that they need. It was just the business was not set up for really good B2B, because B2B you need faster transactions, you need margins, better. So
you're
margins.
seeing so much more scalability if you can get past that.
Yeah, if we can get to the point to where we can meet the margins that the OEMs need, if we can scale production volume to where we need, then yeah, we could absolutely. These manufacturers are dying for good suppliers.
Right.
So that was really kind of like our main focus in the beginning, and then, but I didn't realize this at the time, but what you realize is you can't just have all your eggs in one basket. Like we had, what really jump started the company in the beginning is we got this contract with Remington. It was great. In a way, it was great. Like, it immediately had money coming in, but we were still early in the process. We were making mistakes, and we had one customer.
When was that around?
2016 is when we first got the contract.
Was that before or after they?
Well, before.
Yeah.
Well, before, right?
I wasn't sure if it was the cleanup crew that bought them or not.
No, so 2016 we started that contract, and then we pretty much just focused on that for a while. We did launch a website, but we didn't have very much commercial sales because nobody knew who we were yet. And then we got involved with the dealer like towards the end of 2017, middle 2017, called Red Hawk, and they were doing good business with us. And
where are they out of?
They're out of Grand Junction, Colorado, and that was great because now we had a second place that we could actually sell decent volume to. Well, then, as you were kind of alluding to, Remington goes out of business, and thank God we got on board with Red Hawk, because the entire year of 2018 we didn't have any other business besides Red Hawk, and we were doing everything we could to develop our product commercially instead of just OEM. And so
were you trying to focus on just B2B originally?
Yeah, originally that was our concept, is just B2B, but you realize quickly that that's not realistic. You really have to have a presence. The way for these OEMs, let's just say Remington, for example, to trust you is they have to have feedback from their customers saying, we want this stock. And that means your first thing is you have to show your product to individual customers and have them use it, and then that feedback trickles.
Right? Gain popularity. And
you don't realize that at first, but that's what you realize eventually. So we were like, okay, well, we've got to launch. And this was harder, this was not something we expected to do. But, with my dad, now we were starting to encroach more and more on his business, which I didn't love, but it was like, we've put so much time and effort and money, and now my brand, my name, and my reputation's all wrapped up in this. And so we went forward, and I think he understood. So anyway, we did that, and everything, we ended up able to, launch good product, and we eventually went directly to consumer. Mm-hmm. Plus we had dealers. Now we have rep groups. We still do OEMs, do all kinds of stuff.
Who's your rep groups?
Our rep group's called KJ&A. Ken Jeffries.
What else do they do?
Their big one is Hollow Sun.
Okay.
Trigger Tech.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know all of them. I think they said they have about 20 they rep, but those are some of the big ones.
Right.
There's others I don't know all of them. And as we're relatively new. I'd say we've been really involved with them it's coming up on a year, but the first 6 months is slow. Just trying to get them the product that they need, understanding who all because they have reps in all 50 states. Well, it used to be 37 eastern states, but I think they've started to move into some of the western states. So it's a big machine that it takes a little bit of time.
What's the minimum for dealers to carry your product?
I don't know. I don't even handle that. I think each dealer's different.
Okay.
And if it's dictated by us, typically, I can't remember. Now that you say that, that's something that it's very small. Like it's like 3 stocks, I think.
Okay.
I think you can even buy one if you wanted to.
I was going to suggest that because anytime you'll work with somebody where you can buy one, oh my gosh. I used to have a store.
Yeah.
And it was so frustrating how many places I had to spend $3, $5, $8, $10,000 just to do a buy-in and get started. And I was so small, I didn't have the buying power. That store was started with $67,000. And that money goes fast and it doesn't go far.
Oh, yeah. For sure.
And so that was such a pain. And I remember being at SHOT Show one year and VZ Grips, I was wanting to get some of their grips, but I wanted to carry it for 1911s. But there's so much customization there with all the different fits and styles and everything, then colors. So like the amount of options you actually have to try and carry some of the essentials on the wall, and they wanted me to order 12 at a time. It's like, well, every time I'm reordering, I want to be able to order one because it's going to be a completely custom order. But they'd sell them to you at cost at SHOT Show. So like, I'd go ahead and just buy some of them at the show that I thought would move, but I never signed up with them for that reason. Yeah. And then I went and talked to the Hogue booth, and they said one product. Yeah. We don't care what it is.
Yeah, I do think I have the guy who runs my operations. His name's Ryan as well. He would obviously know that. Him and I had developed that. It's been a year since we developed that particular thing, and I do think you can just buy one. It might be 3, but it's small. It's low.
If you do one, I feel like that's one of the best ways for you to get out there is to be able to get in all the stores, mom and pop places and everything, so people see the product, recognize the name, then start looking on your website.
Yeah, it's there's a number of different ways you can go. You can go direct to consumer, and then you just have to build your network yourself, and that's okay. I mean, QU did that; they did it very successfully.
It's crazy how quick they blew up.
Yeah. So that was a really good model to look at and see. Okay, well, do we want to go distribution, or do we want to go? Can we handle our own distribution, or do we want to get a rep group, or do we want to just go direct to consumer? So there's a number of different ways you can do it. But ultimately, what we wanted to do, especially because our business model was like, we wanted to be able to produce volume. We wanted to have product quickly in the hands of customers who wanted it. And we also need to build our brand. So, being in all these different stores, if people are seeing our brand continuously, that will help us. And there was a long time where we thought maybe that we just wanted to go direct to consumer. Our website's been very successful for us. People just buying directly off our website. And we knew that if we were going to go to a rep group, that would probably, we would end up cannibalizing that a little bit because there's more rules and restrictions once you bring a rep group on, and all the dealers, but we made this kind of conscious decision to do that, and we're still building it, and we, little bit by little bit, we get more and more orders, bigger and bigger, and there are dealers across the United States carrying our product now, so that's great, and all the way from distribution like Bill Hicks and Midway to individual mom and pops who buy, and that's why I'm here actually, because I'm here in Springfield, Missouri, to meet with the guys from Bass Pro and Cabela's, and even though that was a relationship we started directly, but our rep group KJ&A is helping us with that because they understand and know how to navigate this landscape. We weren't even sure we could do the deal because it's just like, I don't know. There's a lot of hoops you got to jump through when you're dealing with people companies that are that big.
Oh, I've seen the requirements.
And it's ridiculous.
Yeah.
So we call our rep group and we're like, hey, I don't think we can do this. Like I don't want to spend all this money on this electronic I don't even know. Anyway, they're like, no, don't say no. Don't say no. We'll figure it out. We'll get one of our other companies that already deals with Cabela's. We'll have you just ship it to them. We'll make this work. And so it took some time for us to figure out how to negotiate all that.
Yep.
And so now I'm actually going to speak with them tomorrow, the Bass Pro rep and my KJ&A rep, as a kind of this group to try to make this work. So yeah, so that's how a rep group can help, in a lot of different ways, whether they're introducing you to people who didn't even know you existed, to adding value in ways that you didn't know you needed it when you're trying to work with bigger and bigger companies. These companies, the big companies, are getting more sophisticated. I've seen it. Even OEMs, like when I first started the business and even back at McMillan, there wasn't a whole lot of requirements. Now the requirements to get on board are much heavier. They're much, you've got to have, you have to have, you absolutely have to have 3D drawings. You have to 2D drawings, and you have to have 3D models. McMillan to this day, I don't even still think they don't even have any. They just do everything by hand. And so, yeah, there's companies are getting more sophisticated, and smaller companies have to keep up with that. We still we have to be able to, supply them with what they need for their quality or their logistics.
That's some of the stuff they require too. It's wild, like the rules on packaging. Once they approve your packaging, it cannot change through the duration of that contract. Like it has to be that packaging. Yeah. Like no word changes, nothing. Like it's crazy.
Yeah. You understand why. Yeah. Totally understand why, but it's hard because as a small company and relatively new, things are changing all the time. Yeah. Like we've run into this problem so many times where we sell a product to an OEM and it's a newer product, right? So it's not really established. So we sell it to an OEM, they're selling it and we're selling it, right? And we're getting feedback from the customers like, this is a problem, or this, we would like this, and we want to make this change. We need to make this change. Yeah, but this is a problem. And so it's a challenge. Like those things can be challenges. Like you develop a product and an OEM has the product and they don't want you to change it. So like, let's say I, as an individual, as a business owner, I want to change that product. Like I know, I'm going to spend the time, the money, and I'm going to make an upgrade. Yep. Well, I have to separate that then from what I'm selling. So yes, I have a particular stock called the Trekker. If I sell that Trekker to Springfield, which we do, and I also sell it to the commercial market, if I want to upgrade the Trekker, they have to jump on board with the Trekker 2, or I just have to kind of separate them. Okay, you get this product and it's only for you, and I have to keep my molds and I have to do. So, yeah.
Well, Glock figured that out. They did the 5th gen Glocks, and on the 19, they did a moon cut on the front strap, which they did that for a little bit on some Gen 3s as well. I don't know who's asking for that. If anything, cuts in the sides made more sense than up front. And you've got the big old lanyard loop set up hole in the back. You don't need that. And one of the most important parts of your grip recoil control for recoil is that pinky holding onto that front lip. And they cut it off. It's like, who are you listening to when you did this? And I swear a lot of it's just it's like 50 plus crowd who's actually hopping on the keyboard and emailing these companies and calling them and everything. And I think it was like maybe 3 to 5 months, and they dropped the moon cut and they went back to that part. But it's crazy. And it's like ambi selector stuff on guns. I'm left-handed. I'm going to do a video on my other channel here soon called All Guns Are Secretly Made for Lefties. And I truly believe that. There's so many ways that I love the right-handed guns and working around them that I find to be very convenient for a lefty. And then everyone went to the magazine releases that were ambi rather than switchable. But then as you're pushing on one side of that button, it's moving the other side in because they're going to a double spring system. Well, now the mag button's 2.5, 3 times as hard to push in. It's like, this is unnecessary. We don't need this. And same thing, the slide lock, they started putting those on the right side of the gun. And one thing that righties have issues with is catching on the slide lock. You probably ran into that when you started shooting the SIG in the beginning. That's a common problem on that gun. As a lefty, I don't have to worry about it. Now they're putting that button on my side of the gun, so now it's becoming a problem for me. So, I don't know, it's wild.
Well, one of the secrets of being a manufacturer is, you're always battling between features for your customer, but also manufacturability.
Yeah.
And sometimes manufacturability gets in the way of good features. And so
That's a good point.
this is something that customers don't typically understand. But from a manufacturer standpoint, like sometimes there are certain features that really cause problems in the manufacturing process and they really bog you down. And you have to figure out a way to get rid of them. And sometimes that means taking away features. And so people are like, oh, why did they do this? It's such a good thing. But like, well, because it was killing us. It was killing production. Like we weren't shipping stuff on time, or we were spending all this extra money trying to overcome this problem. And so that is kind of like a behind the scenes look at why sometimes features disappear that you're like, why did they do that? Now, I don't know the details of what you're talking about, but that does happen.
Yeah.
We've done that multiple times.
Yeah.
It's just kind of the nature of the beast. You know,
makes sense.
You have a feature and you know, you're always, in my business in molding, you know, it's challenging work. The molds are complicated. You don't always know how things are going to fill. And you're trying to add more stuff, but everything you add could potentially cause problems in the molding process. And then maybe that ends up resulting in you have all this extra work, like post-process work that you have to do. And you don't really know what that looks like until you actually start producing a lot of them. And so you always are taking risks because you want to add more features, but you take risks on features and they're new, and it creates a new way of molding or a new thing that you don't understand exactly.
Yeah.
Sometimes they work out great and you're like, dang, okay, awesome. And then other times you're like, it's just really hard to mold that. And, and the product's not coming out well. And it's causing us a lot of extra time and headache. And then there's maybe other issues that the customer finds. Maybe there's some kind of weakness or whatever. And there's a lot of potential issues. And so you get complaints in other areas that are directly affected by that, but they don't even know because
it's the same reason I don't like to do iPhone update when the new phone comes out. I'm aware of the problems it has now, and I don't want to learn the new ones.
Yeah, and I've made workarounds for these problems.
Yes, bingo, exactly.
Yeah,
This is me sounding like an Instagram model, not model, but influencer or whatever. But Accuracy International, I love their classic chassis. I think that is so sick, and I hate the look of the new ones.
Yeah,
it just doesn't do it for me at all. But that old school look,
old one that looks like a boat anchor.
Yes, just one of those in all drab, all the black screws. I love it. It's so naughty. It's
got the little hook on the bottom. Like, why do you have this circle? Like, that's so useless. But okay, we'll just put it there.
It looks dope.
It's like what, a 10-pound chassis. You're like, but people loved it. Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, and that was very popular stock and rifle in general in the military. There's a lot of those. They sold a lot of those to the military.
Yeah, I was surprised when we quit making them for like the 700 and everything.
But I think that was one of the first true chassis out there, and I think it was so revolutionary at the time, and they just kept selling, and they're so expensive and heavy, but it was like, what the heck is this?
Yeah.
Because before that, all you had was your traditional composite stocks and, you know, some wood, whatever, but you didn't really have a lot of like what we call chassis now. It was really the first one that I can remember.
I don't know the difference. What's the difference between a stock and a chassis? Is there a...
You just kind of have to.
I just usually, if it's Gucci, I'll call it a chassis.
No, so the best way to describe it is like chassis are typically aluminum blocks, aluminum bedding blocks. Like they have aluminum in them. Not always. They're majority aluminum. But so you have some chassis like the AI where it's aluminum core, but it's got this plastic-ish shell, and so that's kind of like this weird thing. You call it whatever. Call it a stock. Call it a chassis. Chassis, though, if you really want to try to find a definition, it's aluminum. It's an aluminum stock.
Okay.
Yeah. And then people have grown to say a chassis for these aluminum stocks and like just stock for like a composite.
Yeah.
It's kind of how things have delineated. There's no official definition, but just through listening to people and how our language kind of solidifies in certain ways, that's kind of the best way I can put it.
Gotcha.
But it's not clear. Like a lot of people use chassis for they'll call in and they'll look for, you know, one of our stocks, the stock here. Like, hey, how much are your chassis? We know what they're talking about.
Right.
We don't correct them.
Right.
But that's not how most people use it.
Yeah, I've called it a chassis over and over.
Yeah.
Not realizing that. You want to grab that and walk us through it?
Sure. Yeah. So
this one over here.
Yeah. So this is What's that?
I was going to say, talk to that
Yeah.
one.
Okay. So yeah, this is our Phoenix 2. We've iterated on this. We had originally started with the Phoenix. We just called it the Phoenix, but the Phoenix 1 now. This is by far the most popular stock that we have. It was really the first stock. I could talk for a lot about this, but it was really the first stock that we went to this kind of universal concept. And so, along with trying to manufacture stocks in a much more efficient way, we also had to tackle the issue of all these custom barrel channels and all this customization in the inlet here. So what we decided to do is we said, well, chassis makers are doing this already, but composite stock makers are still like machining barrel channels for the specific barrel. So for instance, a customer would call in, they'd be like, yeah, I've got a Remington 700 and I've got this varmint barrel on. Well, most stock companies, composite stock companies, are going to machine that in, and they're going to machine the barrel channel for exactly what the customer has. That's just how it's traditionally been done. Chassis companies, since they're making aluminum stocks, they just made this big channel. They didn't care, and people accepted it. So we decided to kind of meld the two. We're making composite stocks, but one of the big challenges in making high volume stocks is like not making a custom stock for every single person. So what we did is we made this what we call universal barrel channel. So you can see it's just like this kind of big opening, just like a chassis, just like you'd see in a chassis. And what we did was we started working on the inlet so that like any Remington 700 clone would fit. So if you know anything about Remington 700 clones, they're all based off the Remington 700. But every company that makes a clone has some slight differences.
Course,
where they put the bolt release, where the port is. So what we decided to do, the one thing that fixed that is we lowered the top line, which chassis did the same thing. Before, composite stocks always had the top line right at the center of the action. So the top line of the stock met the center of the action. But if you just decide to drop that lower, you bypass the port, you bypass the bolt release. And so we were like, okay, well, let's do it. So we did all of these changes, which is risky, right? Because we don't know if customers will like it, whatever. We did all these changes with the Phoenix. So long way to get around to that point, but that's what we did. All of ours, we had like 4 models before we did this one, and they all had ports and cuts, and it causes problems because now when a customer calls in, they've got it's more, you have more. I wouldn't say it's necessarily custom, but you just have more SKUs you have to deal with. And it's pain. So our goal is always to reduce the amount of SKUs. So anyway, this is the first one, and it was super successful. The stock was successful, the inlet, everything was successful. Very rarely do we get someone who's like, I don't like this large barrel channel. Sometimes when you have like a really thin barrel, like a hunting stock with a really thin barrel, there's a lot of gaps, and some people don't like that. We have other options. We have stocks that are like this now that have thinner barrel channels you can choose from. But for the most part, no one cared, especially because we're delivering this at a super great price. Like everything came on it. We deliver way faster than anybody else. And so those were the benefits that we were bringing to the customer. And I think, we found a niche. Traditional composite stocks are very custom, takes a long time to get, and they're expensive. We put this stock on the market, and it's a known price. It delivers to you fast, and we can make a lot of them. So for OEMs, they can come to us and say, hey, we want to use this on this particular rifle. Okay. We need 50 a week or whatever. Okay. So that's really kind of where we've developed with this. And this stock was kind of like one of the first ones where we really were able to move forward quickly with where we wanted to be, where our whole vision was from starting the company. But this particular stock, it's mostly designed for like long range hunting, what people would call a long range hunting stock. And it's got the adjustability here in the cheek piece. Talk a little bit about the cheek piece here. Like the cheek piece, you can see it's pretty simple. Like most cheek pieces, if you see a composite stock cheek piece,
all kinds of gadgets and knobs.
It's knobs. It's heavy. It's expensive.
Yeah.
So again, what we wanted to do is make it simple and cheap. And when I say cheap, I don't mean like we're not trying to make it cheap from a manufacturing standpoint, but we want to make it simple so that there's not a lot of cost in it.
Yeah.
So we have there's nothing to this. It works on friction, and it's got one little piece of hardware in here. It's a T-nuts not very expensive. This knob's not super expensive to make. And, you just have to design and manufacture these well so that they fit well, because it stays put based upon friction and geometry. So that's nice, and it's really pretty inexpensive for us to make, so that's nice. We do different color pads. So like this is a brown pad, but we traditionally do black pads, but we have greens and we have all kinds of different colors. This is kind of like an accessory that we put on there. We don't really sell this, but it's something that you can buy from a company. I forget the company's name, but you can.
Unlike the cover.
Yeah. And this particular finish, it's called our fiberwood finish. We did this for a long time. It looks like wood. Like if you're looking at this, you might be like, oh, is that a wood stock? It's not. It's composite. We've experimented with so many different types of finishes, out of the mold finishes. So happy about this one. We've been through some like ups and downs with we've discontinued this for a while. There's times where it's been hard for us to make, hard for us to get consistent. I think customers know that something like this is going to be a little bit inconsistent. That's kind of the beauty of it in a way. But there's some things about it that need to be super consistent, like the coloration and stuff. So like when you advertise something on your website,
right,
and customers and someone sees that, they're like, I want that, and then they get something that's slightly different. That's been a little bit of a challenge we didn't anticipate. So we're still kind of working through that. We'll probably relaunch these, but
I bought a pork pie snare years ago online, and it came in like all brown. In the pictures, it's like almost a rusty brown, but it's got that copper patina style, like greenish white and blue and everything, and mine was like all brown. And so I took it back to the store. Actually, I moved out to LA, and we were cutting a record out there, and I walked into Hollywood Guitar Center, and they had one where the color actually looked dope, and the dude was ticked taking my ugly one in as a return and then taking his gorgeous one out. So I can see where that comes up. Or you buy something in camo and like a patch, and the camo part you got is just really lame.
Yeah. Well, for the most part, we do a really good job with these patterns. But again, even if it's like something that I think is cool, if it's not exactly what it looks like on the website, some customers, they're like, well, this is not what it looks like on the website. I'm like, yeah, it's because everyone's a little bit different, the way it's made. But so we get some of that. And I mean, like this one to me, like they're all really cool looking. But some customers are like, I want that particular dark piece right there. And anyway, so that's a bit of a challenge, but it is what it is.
Yeah.
We got this rail at the bottom here. This is for M-locks. So you can attach stuff to it. This is like a little Arca rail that we attach to it.
What is the Arca rail? I keep seeing that.
It's just a quick way to attach certain accessories. And it's like this dovetail looking thing. So not only can you attach them here, but you can kind of slide them back and forth.
It's the same way the camera mounts work then.
Yeah, as a matter of fact, a lot of the firearms accessories have come from the camera industry.
Really?
As a matter of fact, one of the biggest suppliers of firearms accessories like this is a camera company called Really Right Stuff.
That's wild.
Yeah. So, they've kind of ventured now into the firearms space because guys, before a lot of this became popular, people were looking for really cool ways to adjust and maneuver their guns around, and there wasn't a lot, so they started adapting camera gear to it, and they were buying from Really Right, and this kind of got around in the industry, and Really Right Stuff was selling all this camera gear to firearms people. And so I think since then they've probably started developing firearms products more intentionally, but using that same concept of like camera gear. Yeah.
That's cool.
Yeah. So it's the general overview of the stock. Again, just this is our best selling stock by far. We got it on a number of OEM rifles, and this one's available. Remington 700 long, short, Tikka.
Do you do them for the Remington 7?
No. No, it's not popular enough.
I figured it wasn't. No. There's not a lot out there for it.
Right. So we got other little things like these flush cups here. I don't know if you can see that, but these flush cups here, they're for slings. So we've got 5 different mounting points. One here, one on the other side here, and then 2 up front.
Nice.
So you can mount your sling in a number of different places. You could even mount your sling here. There's adapters for sling mounts on your M-lock. So
so you got one on the front and the back there too?
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, we're just, and you could see kind of like we've got these cutouts. Like we're trying to lean out the stock as much as we can to make it light. Our material's strong, so we can do that.
Nice.
We don't need all this bulk. You can
Right.
see we've kind of leaned out this area. That's why it looks different than most stocks you see, because like we don't need that mass. All it does is add weight.
Right.
So we take out a lot of that mass because the strength is plenty good with this thickness here.
Yeah.
So yeah, our stocks look a lot different because what drives that is manufacturing. You know, like we want to have a lightweight stock, and our material strong enough so we don't need the bulk that a lot of these companies need. So we tend to be very lean. You know, you won't find many places on the stock that are over like a half an inch in thickness.
Mm-hmm.
So and when you see something that's when we see something that's like over a half an inch, we try to make tools to hollow those out during the molding process. So very distinct, I think, look for our product, which is good because we want to be able to stand out from our competition.
Right.
So, and we're not doing it just to do it. We're doing it for functional reasons, and so that's cool too. So yeah, that's pretty much the gist of that.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Business lessons learned, things like that. That's things that stand out to you. Maybe helped you see how you do things the way you do it. Advice on partners.
Oh gosh, I mean, we could go forever on this.
It's a buddy of mine. He's got it's an old saying, but it's like partners are for either fucking or fighting. That's it.
No, I actually, I've been back and forth. I've had partners. I haven't had partners. I've had bad partners. I've had people that are around me that are good. So many lessons. But partners in general, you can do more with more people. But it's so important you find the right people.
Right.
So hard to do.
Yep.
There's a lot of people out there. Maybe they're good people, but they're just not right. I've gotten to a lot of relationships where, you try to make it work, but it only makes it worse. And so getting rid of people as fast as possible. I'm still learning that lesson after 20 years of doing this, 17. Getting rid of people is the best thing you can do as fast as possible. Like, it's going to hurt then, but it's going to hurt more in 6 months when they suck even worse.
Yeah.
And they've taken more out of you and you've taken more out of them. Every business is different, so these are, you can take it all with a grain of salt, but
Right.
the fewer the people, the better. More people doesn't equal better, doesn't equal more, doesn't equal better company, greater company, more potential.
Boy, that's a perception everyone feels before they enter it, though. Right?
Oh, I did.
Yeah.
I
Same.
thought having a successful company meaning having all these employees.
Yeah.
And I've had a lot of employees during my time, and what you find is like, what you have to ask yourself, like, generally, what do I want out of my business? Like, what is the end result? And sometimes that's hard, especially when you're young. You don't know. Like, when you're in your 30s, you have different ideas of what you want than when you're in your 40s or probably in your 50s. But as I get older, I want less headache. That's what I really want. I want to have success. It means a couple things to me. There's a minimum financial reward that I want, which is not much. I'm not really driven by money, but I got to pay the bills. I do what I do because I love it. It's not like I want to make money, like ungodly amounts of money. I'm not driven by that. I don't care. I just want to be able to keep doing fun things,
Mm-hmm.
So, but, influence maybe, like I want to be able to make an impact, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
So if you start looking at those things, like it doesn't equal having all these employees and big buildings and everything. As a matter of fact, what I found is the fewer people, the easier. And for me, it's like there's been times where I've had a lot of employees, and I get farther and farther away from the things that matter, and that you realize that's hard. You tend to spiral out of control if you're not touching everything that really, really matters. And then I say touching, like doing it. So that's another thing, try to be involved in the things that really matter. Like, you're going to have to do daily stuff. Now, people are different. If they want huge companies, you're going to have to let that go, but you're going to have to find the right people, like the best people. And you're going to have to, personnel management, it's like the thing that you do, takes up most of your time. Hiring, firing, setting goals, whatever. And I found that I wasn't really enjoying that. So, what are the other ways to do that? And that's, outsourcing things. And we made everything for a long time. We don't make everything anymore. Just do what matters. So anyway, that's some of my experience. Like, just do the things that really matter and that are going to get you to that goal, and do them with as few people as possible.
Yeah.
One of the things, you played in a band, I've played in a band. One of the things that my band members taught me when I was in a band was like, the fewer personalities you have to deal with, the more likely you are to succeed. Because there's always infighting in bands and all that stuff. Yeah. So if you have 4 or 5 or 6 people in a band, like, for all those personalities to get along and to...
Yep.
So it's the same with business. Get people who are really dedicated to the cause, who you can trust, and go forward with them.
Yeah.
And I've gotten to a position where we've hired people because we just needed the production, and we actually became slower, more clunky, spent more money, more inefficient because we had more people. So it's all about process. And I'll go. I know this is boring, but process, it's everything. I remember hearing that when I was young. I'm like, that doesn't make any sense and stupid, whatever. But when you realize, like, what's the difference between me, my company, Grayboe, and let's say McMillan? It's the way I make things. We both make stocks. So what makes your stock different than? How do you quantify that? What's a tangible thing that you can say? It's your process, how you make things. And even if you don't have like good SOPs, you still have a process. You're just not very organized with it.
Right.
So how you do things is everything, really. It's the whole thing. It's like it's like anybody in the same business space. If you're making a widget, you're making a phone, Samsung, iPhone, you're making the same thing. You're delivering a product that does the same thing but it's the process in which, like, the things that you differ in that process, that what makes you better than your competitor. So that's really important. People overlook that. And even saying that, I'm like, people probably still don't think it's that important, because the way it's even relayed is hard to really grasp it until you sit there and go experience it, and you go, okay, I get it. So yeah, your process is so important, and it's what your people follow. Once you find your process, you're like, okay, this works, do this. I remember when I wanted my employees to be like kind of little mini entrepreneurs. Dumb, stupid, because you need them to just do exactly what works.
Yeah.
Yeah, you think you're the smart, like, visionary, but then you realize you're dumb. No, just do this. And, be smart enough to realize that, like, hey, there's potential changes that can be made, like upgrades, but don't, like, just do that. Let's test it.
Yeah.
So do this over and over, like, do this over and over. Make sure it's the same every time. But be smart enough to realize, like, if you have a pain point, like, let's figure out how you can fix that. But don't just do it. Let's test it and see if there's going to be any other issues that happen from it.
I think one of the biggest things I see in entrepreneurs in the early stages mess up on in product development is they can't stop perfecting the product. And they're always trying to make it better, and they're constantly changing, and the design changes just are a never-ending fight, and there's no growth because they never have a consistent product they can actually put out there.
That's definitely something that takes discipline.
Mm-hmm.
Even your process of development is a process,
mm-hmm.
and you should follow that process. And you should have red lines, and you should have markers that are like, once I don't know, it's a great example, but we are stopping here no matter what. Like, we can't go back and keep making change, because you could always,
right.
The industries change. It takes time to develop a product. So by the time you start it and the time you finish it, things have changed.
Yeah.
And you might be able to say, well, we can add things. This is only going to take me an extra day or an extra $1,000 or whatever. Like, we can add this and it won't be a big deal. Okay. But then all of a sudden, like for us, we design a product, then we design our molds. So this 2-step design process. And then we have to make the molds. So we manufacturing the molds and then we make the product. And so that takes 6 months at least.
Yeah.
So by the time the molds are like getting made, you've already spent like 4 months developing this product, and you're like, you see another product come out, and you're like, oh shit.
Yep.
Damn
and
it.
it makes you
You
want,
know?
Yeah.
So that makes you really want to go back. And,
Right.
But then you'll do that forever, and you'll never launch a product.
I did that with my gun YouTube channel, because like I'd see some element covered, I've already filmed it, and then I see somebody else put some little piece that I have to have that in there. It's like, what am I going to go reshoot the whole thing?
Yeah.
No, just deal with it. It's like, you missed that one, dummy.
Yeah.
Go ahead and go forward.
You know, businesses succeed in all kinds of different ways. You know, some of the most unlikely businesses, or maybe not unlikely, but businesses that you're like, or product that you're like, that's a good product, but it's not great, but they do other things really well. So like, you can succeed in a lot of different ways. You could fail in a lot of different ways. You have great product, great features, and you can have a horrible customer service or whatever, you know, and just fail because of that, or can't deliver on time. So, you know, like, just do the basics right.
Yeah.
You know, and you know, if your product's not like, if your product, you launch a product and it's like 80% what you want still, but you launch it on time, you have discipline, you have your customer service ready, you have your marketing ready, everything's flowing, it's going to be way more successful. If you keep you're going to spend all kinds of money, you know, developing, you know, continuously never-ending development, and you're never going to. So one of the biggest costs of doing business is development costs. Let's say it costs you $100,000 to develop a product. Well, the longer it takes you to launch it, the less money you make. So there's this gap. It takes me $100,000 in 6 months. I can start making at month 7. And here's how much money I'm going to make. Let's say I'm going to make $100,000 off this product a month, or I'm going to, whatever, 100,000. Well, if I delay that a month and I start at month 8, I've just lost another $100,000.
Plus additional costs.
Plus the additional costs. So you got to really think about that. Like, people don't think about that. Like, well, I just spent an extra $5,000 on this. I know it took me an extra month to launch it. No, you just missed out on all those sales opportunities. And people say, well, you know, your launch makes you more. No, when you look at the life cycle of that entire product, let's say it's 10 years. Well, you missed a whole month out of selling that product. No matter what way you look at it, you missed a month of selling that product, 2 months, 3 months. And how much money are you making per month on average over? And you can just guess, not guess, but you can just basically, you know, it's an estimate. Just estimate $100,000. I just lost $100,000 because that's how much that product has made me every month for life. So that's a good way to look at it. People don't think about it, but like, that's where your real money's lost.
I'm not a big fan of quotes, but I've saved 2 on my phone in my life where it's like, I need to be looking at this daily. And one of them was along the lines of, if your product is perfect at launch, you've launched too late.
Yeah, I've heard that one.
And I've
heard that one.
I am very guilty of that. It took me 6 or 7 years before I made my first YouTube video that I published. I made my first YouTube video at the beginning of that timeline.
Yeah.
And I never published it because there's things that I thought could have been better. I didn't like my delivery. And, you know, it's crazy. And all those years, had I been putting those out at that time, would have been a cake deal. Would have meant I probably would have had a podcast 6 or 7 years ago too.
Yeah, it is true. It's very true. It's very like, you know, perfectionists.
Yeah.
You know, if you're a perfectionist, that's like.
My other fail point has been going too wide, trying to take on too much stuff. It's just like, I just showed you a product I'm launching soon. I didn't show you 1, I didn't show you 2, I showed you 3. Like, here I am launching something, and I'm coming out with 3 of them at once.
Yeah, you know, you make all these everybody does. Everybody makes these mistakes, and the longer you've been in business, the more you learn, and hopefully you learn from your mistakes and you fix them. And you're right about that. Like, I don't even at this point, because there's so much at stake for launching a stock, because all the mold costs and development costs. Like, yeah, do I look at it and go, man, we should have put that in there? But do I ever stop? No. Like, if we stop somewhere, like we had to stop the other day, pissed me off because we had some dimension wrong. But that just cost me a month.
Yeah.
And I'm just pissed.
Yeah.
Cost me a month because of my designer. I don't know if it was my designer. I don't want to blame him, but like, there were some dimensions that weren't right.
Yeah.
And we caught him luckily, but So yeah, you don't ever want to stop that process. You want to keep that going, and the faster you can launch something, the more you recover your money quicker. I mean, obviously there's recovery. There's recovery money. Like if you're going to spend money on developing a product, let's say it's $100,000, your hope is that you can recover that money in a certain amount of time. You determine what that risk is for you, what period of time you're going to recover, how much money you're going to allocate to each product sold, and for that recovery. But if you keep delaying it, cash flow. People say this all the time. Cash flow is king. It is. You could have all this money in your balance sheet, but if it's not liquid, you're going to go out of business.
Right.
You have to be able to spend that money. If it's locked up in a developing product, if you got $100,000 locked up in that, and you can't, the only way to unlock it is to sell get the product to market.
Right.
So, yeah, there's so many things to know about business. It's crazy. I remember when I first got into business, I'm like, it's got to be just common sense. It's not common sense. You just learn the hard way. I do, at least. I learned the hard way.
Yeah, I love learning from the losses. Like what you learn from that is so powerful, and you always learn so much more from the mistakes. I feel like, and sometimes the stuff when you're getting it right, you're not even paying attention to it. It's not standing out, and there's not a lesson that's learned that's as valuable as where you do make mistakes. Man,
even business plans. When you're a young entrepreneur and you're really excited, you tend to do these extremely complex business plans, and you realize very quickly that things go way differently than you hope, and your whole business plan is just useless. I am way over here.
I spent 8-9 months putting my business plan together when I still lived in LA, planning for the idea of a store. And I remember probably 8-10 months in, I went and flipped through that. It's like, this is not at all what I had on paper. Not at all.
Yeah. It makes you think. Part of me goes, you need a direction. You need a direction, but you have to allow that direction to be so loose that you can,
where it's adaptable.
Yeah, well, you've got to be able to take the advantages. You got to be able to take advantage of opportunities when they come. So you can't be so rigid. You're just blindsided, and then you got this opportunity. You're like, nope. Sometimes you do, and those are the hard things. Sometimes you need to say no to opportunities. Sometimes you need to say yes, but you can't allow your business plan to force you into something you don't want to do. If there's an opportunity, sometimes you got to take it. Sometimes it's worth it.
Right.
So, yeah, business plans is something even for my time as a business owner have developed and gotten simpler and simpler and simpler and more flexible. You just need a guide, this is where I'm going. Everybody's got to, your employees and everybody has to know where you're going.
That's a good point.
Yeah. You just need a direction, and then you got to be flexible as things come up.
Honestly, I'm thinking of working at different jobs and everything too. That's interesting how I've not even known what their vision was.
Yeah. Yeah.
Or the direction they want to go.
Mm-hmm.
It's just here's what you're doing, and just do this, and that's all.
Yeah, and it's a problem with business owners. I mean, I've been caught in it too, where the vision isn't clear, and sometimes it's so hard. You're supposed to have core values, and none of it. These gurus out there make it seem simple. It's not. It's not simple. It's not simple at all. It's really hard to communicate well to your employees and to get them. That's why I say have as few employees as possible, because 30 employees, 10 of them don't care. 15 of them don't even care. They're just there for a paycheck. The others may care a little bit, maybe not. I don't know. But when you've got employees that are, especially in manufacturing, it's manufacturing jobs. They're bouncing around. It's just the nature of it. I have a lot of manufacturing friends. As much as you think you're a badass business owner, you've got employees that are just going to bounce around. They just are there for the paycheck. Now everybody needs to make money, of course, but some people they're going to do the minimum amount, and you're trying to do your best to vet these people, but it's the nature of the business.
Right.
So trying to relay, you're the business owner, you're so invested in this. You got money, you got your emotions, everything's invested in this. You got people who don't, and then you got the other side of the spectrum of people who don't care. It's hard. It's really a mental fuck. So that's why ultimately I'm like, well, I just want to be around people that really care. So I'm gonna pare my company down to people who really care. And I'm gonna outsource some of this stuff to people who also care, but they care about their portion of the business, and they're going to make money off their portion. And so, yeah, vision is important, and it's hard when the more people you have and the people. I give a state of a company every year, and you could see some people in the state of the company, they're just dozing off, and it's frustrating.
Yeah.
So, but you need a business plan. You need it for yourself. You need it for the people who do care. You need to know. They need to know where they're going, and what the outcome is, and what maybe success looks like. And that we need to be flexible if opportunities arise. So be willing to be flexible too. Yeah, it's a balance. I'm the type of person who really loves black and white. I like very defined rules.
Mm-hmm.
But there's some things in life that just are not that way.
Right.
And that's business plan. Business plan is that way. And that's why I'm looking for every new cycle I'm modifying my business plans. I'm modifying the way I communicate with my employees. And I'm always looking for that structure, like the backbone of creating a business plan for my business. And you get closer every time I do it, I get closer. But it's still a work in progress.
Yeah.
So
one of the cool things I like about you creating something like this is your background being around it from the family business. Mm-hmm. Then you went on and became a Navy SEAL to where you're actually on the ground operating with these types of tools. And we haven't talked about your education, where you got a degree in physics.
Right, yeah.
And so it's like, dude, you're like checking all the golden boxes of somebody who's wanting something like that on something that they'd want to take into the field.
Yeah, so I ended up getting my degree after I got out of the military. I used the GI Bill, so that was cool.
Yep.
It was hard because I had 4 kids at the time. My youngest was like less than a year old when I started.
Wow.
My wife was a hero because she allowed me to do this. She's always been really cool about that type of stuff. And I was running a business at the time. Physics degree, like it's not an online degree. And I live 45 minutes away from the campus, so I had to drive 2 to 3 times a week to the campus and back and run my business. And I had little kids. That was a really busy time in my life. But I was so dedicated to wanting to do it and get it done. I love physics. It was always my huge passion of mine. It just never worked out that I actually was able to pursue that. But it teaches you a lot. It teaches you about science and scientific method and how things work. And so I was excited about that. That was awesome for me. It was great for me. I don't really use physics on a daily basis or even at work at all. But the principles are there and the concepts are there. And so...
Has it helped you into the design?
I don't know. I'm sure somewhere. I'm sure the way that I think has a lot to do with my background in physics, and that probably comes out in design or in some of the ways I think about manufacturing or design. So directly, I can't really point to anything in particular, but probably indirectly for sure.
One thing I love about your cheek riser design is it's not full of snag points all over the dang stock. And you see that on so many of these where there's all this adjustability to where there's literally holes and pieces sticking up with a little cutaway here, and there's just all these places for things to snag on. And it's on the LE side, whether I'm grabbing out of my trunk or from a seat next to me or from the lock, like just having a rifle that doesn't have things sticking off of it everywhere is very important. Just because I didn't want, and when you're carrying it too, hooking up on your gear and everything. So,
I like to make things simple. I mean, I like the Einstein quote: "Make things as simple as possible, but not any more simpler than you have to." That's not exactly, I butchered it a little bit. Make things simple, but only as simple as they have to be. Something like that.
Yeah.
There's certain things that you can go too far, making it too simple, but make it as simple as you possibly can without compromising features or some ergonomics or whatever. So I'm a big fan of that.
What's your favorite bipod?
Oh, I don't know. I mean, I'm not a big, huge bipod. I used the Harris bipod for most of my life in the military, but they've got lots of new bipods out now. I mean, I've used a number of them, and They're cool. I mean, there's one from Elite Iron. I think it's called the Revolution. It basically is a full 360. You could lay sideways.
Right.
And actually, the thing can go all the way in a circle. Like if you wanted it to. I don't know why you ever would, but it could. MDT's come out with some bipods. I've never used them yet, but there's a number of bipods I've used. I don't know. I think probably if I had to pick one, that Revolution was pretty cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, for its time, I think it was really kind of revolutionary.
Yeah.
And now a lot of companies are doing more of that, like at least half circle, where it's got the smooth transition. But that was kind of a cool one.
Yeah. I still just use a Harris because it worked. There's some things where I stay old school on just because I didn't really I don't run enough where I need a bipod anyways, but the time that I had in it did everything I wanted to. And some of them, it's like they offered a lot, but they got too complex where it wasn't as quick to deploy and everything.
Yeah.
I'd run the Harris, do the 550 cord connected, where it's the knot that just gets tighter every time you pull. You just go up there and yank it down, and both of them drop.
Actually, I put my Harris bipod on backwards, and I got so much crap for it, but I did it anyway because you could fold the legs up towards you, which made your rifle low profile, much more low profile. Instead of this big legs hanging off the front of your stock, you kept them tight into your stock. And as I told you before, like I'm a type of person who really likes my stuff tight.
Yeah, and you're bringing that weight to the core.
Yeah, and you have to know that if you push hard on that, your legs might collapse. But as long as you knew that, you were fine. So. I remember when I first got out of the military, and I had a rifle that way, and I think I put something on social media, and I got all kinds of shit for it. I'm like, dude, this is what I ran. I know it's not the way it's supposed to be, but this is the way I like it because it's
fun
nice
to literally say Navy SEAL here.
Yeah, they don't care. It's not that cool.
Okay, DD-214.
Yeah.
Man, if you could go back and talk to young you for not to necessarily, I don't know, whether that's crushing hopes and dreams or lessons to be learned or things you wish you knew prior going to the military. Like some of those things that would have really helped someone younger who's watching this.
So specifically for the military?
Yeah. And we can go beyond that too. Dive into business or whatever you want. Fatherhood.
I don't think I would have changed anything, but I will say that specifically for the SEAL teams, what really helped me was doing some of the training beforehand. Because most of the stuff that I encountered, I had done, and it didn't scare me. I mentioned, I did the 50-meter underwater swim. Well, I did that a bunch of times. I never passed it, on my own, but I did it. And I spent 3 months kind of in waiting before I went to boot camp. And so I read and watched everything I could about the certain evolutions that buds threw at you. So like drown proofing was one of them. And so I did that. I tied my hands and feet, and I got comfortable. I knew how to do it.
Smart.
And so I did all those things. I got really comfortable with the things that really get people sideways.
Yeah.
That was one of the biggest things because as I said, I wasn't a great performer, so I needed all the advantage I could get. So having those little things where I felt good about my ability to pass, calmed me down a little bit. Those could have been the difference between me making it, me not making it. So I think that's the biggest thing I would say to people, especially if you're wanting to go into something that's going to be physically demanding and there's certain evolutions that you have to pass that are challenging. Do them as many possible times as you can before you get in. There's no way to mentally prepare yourself. People ask me that all the time. I've trained a number of people who've gone in. How do I prepare myself? What push-ups do I people are always asking what exercises to do. Do push-ups, pull-ups, sit-ups, swim, run. Those 3 things. Just do those 5 things. Just do those. You don't need to bench press. You don't need to do some certain jiu-jitsu martial arts. You can. It's not going to hurt. But is there some secret sauce? No. You're just going to get your ass beat for a year. You're going to have to take it. Yeah, should you have some muscle? Should you know how, yes, you should be in shape. But if you want to go to the gym and work out, fine. Do that. There's no way you can put yourself in a situation that those instructors are going to put you in. You are going to find out who you are right during that time. That's all there is to it. Yes, be in shape, but there's nothing else I can tell you to do. You're going to find out who you are, and you're not going to find it out pre-military. You're not going to be able to put yourself in that situation.
Right.
You're only going to find out once you're there.
It's all designed that way.
Yeah. I mean, the SEAL teams over the years have tried so many different ways to get more people through that process. They've tried pre-program after pre-program, training people. Doesn't matter. None of it's ever helped.
Wow.
None of it's ever helped.
You either got it or you don't. Yep. But you can put in time ahead of time to at least prepare.
There's little things, like I said, where you can, the big thing about BUD/S is it's a very, very stressful environment. So if you can eliminate any stress on you, that is helpful. And some of that means like having confidence in going into an evolution that you can pass it.
Mm-hmm.
So that is something that you can do. But like certain workouts, just run, swim, do push-ups, pull-ups, and sit-ups.
Do SEALs do SEER?
Yeah.
Was that fun?
I didn't do it because they cut out a lot of stuff because we were going right to war.
Right. Yeah.
So
I hadn't thought about that.
They cut out. The funny thing is, people ask me, and I'm embarrassed that I've never been to jump school. I've jumped out of planes. I did static line, Fort Benning, and all that stuff, but I've never been to free fall because they cut it out.
That's wild. Yeah.
They're
Because
like,
they just needed bodies.
We need you to prepare for war. You're not going to be jumping into stuff.
Right.
You end up at Dev Group, fine. Maybe you jump into it, but at SEAL Team 2, you guys are going to be inserting and extracting, infill and exfil with in Humvees and helicopters, and so that's what you need to train. So there was a number of things that they pulled from us, like standard courses that they pulled from us. One of them was jump school, free fall, and the other one was SEER. So we didn't do those. I'm sure I'm probably missing a few, but yeah, it's crazy to think I was in at the very beginning of the war, and people are like, oh, how was free fall? Didn't do it.
Yeah.
I don't know. Which sucks because it's kind of like a check in the box.
Right.
Whatever.
What was your gun of choice?
Well, we got to choose our sniper rifles, but we didn't get to choose our ARs or anything. That was kind of, well, I guess I take that back. So on the assault side, we had our 10-inch M4 and we had our 14-inch M4, but they were both M4s.
Right.
10-inch M4s were for clearing houses and 14-inchers were for patrols.
Yep.
And then, so sniper rifles, we had 4 of them, if I remember. We had what we called the Mark 16. It was basically the M4 sniperized version.
Okay.
Did I say that right?
It's like the Mark 12.
Accurized version. It was Mark 12. Yeah, that's what it was. Mark 12? I said Mark 16. It's not the Mark. You're right. It's Mark 12.
Mark 12, yeah.
The accurized version of the... and we used that most of the time because we were in mostly urban environments. We also had the Mark 13, which was a 300 Win Mag with a McMillan A2 stock on it. We had the 50 cal, which was a McMillan product too. What the hell was that?
Did you carry a McMillan product?
I never. No, I never in combat. I had it. I mean, it was issued to me, but we never used it. I never used it. I'm trying to think. I think there's a 4th one. So there was a 5.56. There was the 300 Win Mag. There's a 50 cal. I want to say there was a 7.62. Oh yeah, this SR25.
Okay.
The SR25. Yeah, the Knight's Armament SR25. Yep. So that was a 7.62 version, gas gun version sniper rifle.
I did my Armorous course research on that one during COVID.
Mm-hmm.
It was pretty awesome. They literally said, "Here's the test. Answer it in an email." And then I sent it to them, and they sent me the cert. So normally that class is $1,400. Wow. So not having to pay that plus the travel and everything, go down to Florida. That was so cool.
Yeah, probably my favorite gun was that Mark 12. It was really cool because it was very familiar because it was a M4, so you were very comfortable with it. But it also had a longer barrel. I think it was a 16-inch barrel. Maybe that's wrong. 18-inch barrel. You had a better optic on it. I can't remember what we had. Probably a Leupold or something. Right. Maybe it was a Night Force. We had a bunch of different types of optics we used. But it was like you felt like you were carrying an M4, which you're so comfortable with. We shot so much of that, but you had the sniper rifle capability. So it was really. I thought it was probably my favorite, and I carried that more than anything else on my sniper ops too. So that was a cool gun. I don't think I I don't know if I ever even carried anything else.
On the M4s, what optics were you selecting?
On our 14 inches, we had ACOGs, those were cool. Those are super cool. On our 10 inches, we started with the aim points, red dot sights,
Mm-hmm.
and then I think we ended up moving to the EOTechs later. But the aim points, they were good. They all worked well. Everything worked.
Do you see any pros and cons between those two?
I like the aim point better, probably because I had more experience with it. I felt like it was easier to deal with. It was bigger. It was like almost like a little mini scope.
I like that I can just leave it on and not worry about it, and it doesn't have an auto kill after 6 hours or whatever.
I feel like there was something, I can't remember. It's been a long time now, but I ended up, if I had to say, I think I like the aim point better, even though I think the EOTech was a little bit kind of more lean in a way.
Mm-hmm.
It was also bulky in a way too. But yeah, I think the aim point, I would say, was my favorite. Yeah. And then the ACOGs were really cool. The ACOGs, we were able to also mount these little red dot. I think we call them. What do we call them?
The Doctor or the RMR?
Yes.
In the Doctor face.
Yeah, I want to say it was like Doctor, like something like that.
It's like Doctor with an owl on the side of it.
Oh, man, but it was these little teeny tiny red dot sights that we were able to mount like at a 45. So if we needed to go into a house with our 14-inch red ACOGs, you don't want to look through an ACOG in close quarter. So you would learn how to tilt your gun to a 45, and you could shoot red dot. That was cool. I thought that was awesome.
I always loved how they had the ACOGs with the Doctor on top.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what I wanted back in the day, and never could afford one on a cop's salary. But now later in life, I've got like a 1-6, and then I have a red dot, and I ran it angled for a few years. Then I put it on top, trying that 12 o'clock position, thinking that was great, until you're prone and needing to use it, and you're cranking your neck way up higher, and you're also sticking your dome way up higher than you need to, and everything. And I've gone back to the angled setup now.
Yeah, I think the 45 was just, it's easier. You're there, and all you do is just a flick of the hand. You don't have to move anything else. If it's above, you're moving. Now you move your cheek weld, and now you're a little bit more unstable. We're so used to manipulating the gun, whether it's the safety switch or the anything. Mm-hmm. It was just easy for us. The muscle memory to just flip at 45 was just really easy.
Well, and you still got your cheek on the gun too.
You got your cheek. You got your shoulder still buried into the stock. I mean, and that's what you want. You want that stabilization. You want something quick that you can just go boom. And instead of trying to bring your head up and then find it.
And that was one of the issues I had. I didn't realize that not having the cheek weld as an index point.
Yeah.
That's one of the things that I thought was really stupid about it, because you're catching yourself bobbling a little bit. Yeah. It's like, okay, if I'm doing that when I'm new to it, that's probably the scenario I'm going to feel like I'm doing if I'm actually having to pull the trigger on this thing.
Yeah.
That's crazy. Act of Valor, what'd you think when that came out?
It's a movie, right?
I'm pretty sure it's the one where there's some active SEALs that were playing their parts in it.
I watched it, and it's been a long. What's that been out for over 10 years?
Oh yeah, probably. Yeah.
So it's hard for me to remember. I thought obviously the acting was kind of, but it was cool because it was, from what I remember, it felt pretty real.
Yeah.
So I thought that was cool. I'm not a big movie guy. I don't watch a lot of war movies, especially around the time that I was in. I think mostly because I want to keep my own memories, and I don't want them to be jaded by Hollywood. But I think I watched that one because they were real guys, and I was like, okay. I've had a number of people close to me die that they've made movies about, and like I haven't even watched them, just because I have my memories about them, and I don't want them to be replaced by Hollywood. And maybe those movies were great, and maybe that I ended up watching American Sniper too. That was one of the other movies I watched, and I knew Chris, but I watched it because I gave him that rifle that he made, that famous rifle that's in Bass Pro.
Yeah,
that's a McMillan, and I literally handed that gun to him.
Wow!
And so I wanted to kind of watch. As a matter of fact, I think my wife had to convince me to watch it. It's not that I'm like scared or get emotional about it. I value my memories of people, and I don't want them to be cheated.
That makes sense. I like the perspective on that.
Yeah.
One thing, people read a book and then the movie comes out and they complain about the movie because it wasn't as good as the book.
Yeah.
Anytime I haven't read a book and I know a movie's coming out about it, I wait and watch the movie first, because then you're not disappointed by the movie. And then you read the book. The weird thing is now you're visualizing the movie characters, right? And then you get so much more of the story. So it's like,
makes sense.
Yeah. And so anytime I see the movie's coming out, I will read the book after seeing the movie, and then I get to enjoy both of them.
Yeah.
And I'm surprised when people hear that and then they go run out to get the book real quick and read it ahead of time, and then they hate the movie.
Yeah.
It's crazy. You seem like you're super level-headed, squared away. Obviously been around some wild stuff in your life, lost friends and everything. How do you stay so stable and squared away in that world?
I don't know. I think it's partly who I am.
Yeah.
I mean, I've always been. I don't know. I am very non-emotional. There's benefits and drawbacks to that.
Yeah.
I don't get too high or too low. That's surely from my military experience, my military days. There's absolutely good things about that, and there's bad things about that. Luckily, I've stayed married. Coming up on 20 years. That could be negative. But I've got a very loving and accepting wife when it comes to that. She's a lot like me in a way too, so we kind of feed off each other in a little bit like that.
That's nice. If you dated a really emotional person, you would just be this emotionless wall.
And I don't deal with that emotion very well. Like I don't, because maybe that's how I grew up and how I was trained. I think emotion is probably not true, but the way I internalize it is like, if you can't control your emotions, there's some kind of weakness happening. There's some weakness. You need to be able to control, like, not that you can't have emotions, but control them.
Yeah.
So I see that as a sign of weakness. And I think that's right. But that's how I am. And probably not going to change much. Now, my kids, I'm different with my kids. I have friends. I was lots of friends.
Ask about family next.
But
I
love my kids. I love hanging out with them and playing with them, and I can let loose. And I'm not always like that, but I can, I can vary. But when it comes to work and serious things, and when you need to get things done, just put your head down and focus. And
what's some of your guidance in parenting with kids growing up in today's world?
Oh, I don't know.
Because I feel like the world shapes them opposite of you.
If you were to tell me,
let the world do it.
If I was 20 years ago, you'd say, okay, I'm going to fast forward your life till today, and you're going to see how you parent. And then we go back. I'd be like, no way, that's me. I'm a softie.
Really?
I'm way too soft on my kids. And it's probably, I don't know. Maybe it'll be for their good. Maybe it won't be. I don't know why I'm a softie. Maybe because my parents were pretty hard on me overall. And my parents were good people, for the most part. I don't know. I love my kids, and I want them to have a loving family and a loving father. And it's hard for me to see them in pain. And pain is how we grow and learn. So I get that, but it's hard for me to put them in pain.
Yeah.
I'm a protector, I love my kids, and I would do anything for them, and my wife and my family. And part of what comes with that is taking on if necessary, taking on all of that pain for them, I feel like some ways that's part of my job as a man, as a dad, as a husband. It may not seem like that to them because I made them do dishes and that's painful, but okay, you got to have some discipline. But yeah, that's I was having this conversation recently. Like it's hard because you want to give your kids the best life you can, but in so doing that, they don't get a lot of adversity or adversity in their life. And a lot of very successful people have gone through lots of adversity, and that's how you learn. That's how you grow. And when you have a life that two parents around and things are relatively stable and there's not a lot of challenges, so you hope that doesn't end up bad for them. That's my only thing that I worry about, is that I've been too soft on them.
I didn't realize until having kids, when they ask a question, how much I make sure I'm shaping a lesson with the answer. Like, I didn't realize that was going to be part of the game, and it really is kind of turned into that. And it's almost like just anything they ask that requires at least 3 or more sentences to answer, there's like a lesson behind it. It can be, and that's been really wild. Like, learning that process and trying to figure out and leading, like, taxation is theft, blah blah blah. I had little elements of me that would talk about stuff like that, and then I realized I'm turning my stepson, like, he's going to the extreme route. So then we had to, let's kind of pull this back, and that's where I was like, oh, okay, there's got to be careful thought to some of this with how we actually communicate with kids.
Yeah, your kids absorb a lot from you, I think.
Yeah.
I think it's a lot more about what you do than what you say. And I'm the type of person, and my wife too, we're not big talkers. We're pretty introverted for the most part. So we're not constantly talking to the kids about like life lessons. Talk to the kids, but it's not like I could imagine extroverts just never like, well, I'll go pick one of my kids up from practice or something, and we'll have a short conversation, but most of the car ride's silent. That's just kind of how we are. So they're watching you, and for us, they're watching your actions. And so to me, that was always been important, is how I act around them. My dad was one of those experiences where I knew what not to do. My dad was a very angry human, and I have just a lot of memories of him just yelling, constantly yelling and being angry, and so I didn't want, I wanted to make sure that wasn't the experience that my kids got. It's like I told you before, you only can just do a little bit better than your dad. I find myself, I still have his traits sometimes. I still see them come out when I'm reacting and not thinking. And so I try not to do that, but it happens.
When I came back from that Warrior Path program, like the next day, the way my stepson was yelling at the dogs, it just tore me up, realizing he's doing what I did.
Yep. Yeah, I know.
And it's like, and I saw how much uglier it was, just my.
Then how you thought you were being perceived.
Yeah, and how exactly, and how I was before that. Yeah. So I had one of my best friends was shot and killed, and that was the catalyst on what was already a rough downward spiral. And then finally I went to that program, and it was amazing.
Yeah, I've whether it's my military or how I grew up or whatever,
combination.
Well, there's
probably.
There's always I see a lot of weakness in a lot of things, and maybe things I shouldn't, maybe things that are probably good for me, but this is how it is. It's how I think this is how you get wired. And for a long time, I didn't know any SEAL team guys who like went to even wanted to get diagnosed with PTSD or anything like that. And
Right.
all of a sudden, you see a lot of SEAL team guys killing themselves, and I think a lot of our community thinks it's a sign of weakness if you have a problem,
Yep.
if you have, if you need help, let's say. So I think there's a lot of that. You want to be the rock that people can lean on and be immovable. And so whether it's visible to somebody else or only visible to you, it's still like no chinks in the armor, no weakness. Probably good, but I'm sure there's some bad things about it too.
Yeah.
I don't know.
I think it's double-edged.
Yeah, it's probably double-edged.
Was there anything else you want to talk about? Pitch?
No.
Say?
No, I mean,
We'll talk about, you got something
Sure.
you're dropping soon on the internet, hopefully.
Yeah. So
Don't say it unless you have all your URLs lined up.
yeah, we do luckily.
Okay.
But first the main business, Grayboe, Grayboe. We make these rifle stocks. It's our flagship company. We really put a lot of time and effort into designing, developing rifle stocks. So if you're interested in that, and you're interested in like not having to go through all kinds of really stressful process of getting a stock, we're the company for you. Grayboe.com. You can find us there. Go right to our website, search our different products, find what you want. Go to maybe a local gun store has it. Communicate directly with us either way. And we're also going to be launching a podcast here soon. I haven't actually put anything out on this, so I don't know when this podcast is going to launch, but I assume by the time this one launches, we'll have some stuff up. It's going to be called The Ryan McMillan Show. And it's going to be ryanmcmillanshow.com. I don't know when that website will be up, but eventually it will be. And we'll have different social media platforms. We'll be on Instagram, YouTube, Rumble, X, Facebook, TikTok, all the usuals. So, yeah, Ryan McMillan Show. Check that out. Probably launch end of October, beginning of November, and from there on, we'll just keep consistently launching new episodes. So that's it.
Heck yeah. Thank you so much for coming in.
Absolutely.
Awesome.
Thank you.